Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming. Welcome to the Weizmann Institute. Let me start from some explanation on the conference poster. So it has a part of the fresque on from Florence. The fresque is called Joseph's Dream. We have edited it a bit for clarity. So Joseph's dream was probably actually about perverse equivariant sheaves, and this was completely misunderstood in ancient times, which caused a lot of problems to the biblical Joseph, and he had to switch to more practical problems like agriculture of the ancient Egypt or building mansions. Well, luckily our Joseph was able to formalize and explain his dreams, and this allowed him both to stay a mathematician and to come to Israel in his lifetime. So happy birthday, Joseph, and may all your dreams come true. Now I pass the microphone to Andrei, who will clarify some organizational aspects of such an unusual conference, a Zoom conference. So, Andrei, please.
Okay, I think this commencement of this conference was a little bit premature because I think the main participant is not here yet. So I guess Dima will repeat his greetings. Okay, so we are happy to have you all here in this little bit strange medium. Now, just a second. Hello, Dima. Okay, just hold on. Okay.
Okay, so meanwhile, I will say some things. So everyone is muted, but if you want to ask a question, then please raise your hand. I mean, not physically, because we might not be able to see this, but there is a button in Zoom, raise your hand. We will see this and from time to time ask the speaker to stop and answer some questions. There is also a chat. You are welcome to use it to chat with each other or with other organizers. Probably the speakers won't have any time to check the chat. It will only disturb them. They will concentrate on their lecture. And now each speaker, please also raise your hand in the beginning of your lecture so that we will see you in Zoom and unmute you. Now the slides of some of the speakers are already on the conference webpage. You are welcome to download them and look back if you need sometimes. Otherwise, the speaker will also, of course, share the screen. We will also do our best to share the slides in the chat. If we don't do this, this means either we don't have the slides or maybe the speaker is not using slides, so is using his iPad or some other way of presentation. One more thing, on the last day, we will have a group photo after the last lecture, which will be just copying the screen of Zoom. So please make your video if it's okay with you, and make your video available. And we will also have some kind of a virtual banquet. So everyone who would like to say anything on the conference or some birthday greeting to Joseph is welcome to do this on the last day after the last lecture. Of course, at the end of each lecture, we will have some questions and about 5 minutes break, and we will be using the same link for the whole day. The link for tomorrow we will publish on the website sometime today. We are also broadcasting this live on YouTube, unless there are some technical difficulties, but I hope the broadcast works and it will stay recorded on YouTube. Andrei, did I forget anything?
No, I guess not. But I'm not sure if Joseph heard your
okay, let us
special words.
Okay, I'm pressing unmute, but it doesn't work.
Doesn't,
I'm pressing unmute on, yeah, okay, now it worked.
Ты можешь сказать, тебя отомьютили.
Oh, I don't know what to say. I am very glad to have this conference. That's all I can say.
Спасибо, Юля.
Спасибо. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. We owe to you a lot. Did you hear my explanation about the poster?
Yes. Yes.
I hope it's okay with you. I didn't ask for your permission.
And that's fun with it, with the explanation.
It was funny explanation, but maybe correct.
Okay, so where is David Kazhdan?
Yeah, I don't see him.
Here.
I cannot unmute myself.
We unmuted you.
Okay. All right.
So, okay, hello everyone. So be patient because for both organizers, it's the first conference, not only as organizers on Zoom, but also as participants. So bear with us. Okay, so our first speaker is David Kazhdan.
Andrei, I'm sorry, but it's formally it's too early, so I suggest
earlier. Yes.
So what I suggest that David will say whatever he would like to say to Joseph, and then at 3 start the mathematical part of the talk. What do you think?
Okay, if you unmute me, so I know Joseph.
You are unmuted. You are unmuted, but we see only part of you.
I also see only part of me, and only so it's all right. But I know him for more than 60 years. It's kind of reasonable time when our paths were going quite close. We talk a lot together, worked less than talked, moved more or less from the same places, spent on Gelfand seminar at Harvard and Jerusalem and Israel. And I'm very glad kind of to being able to celebrate with all of present from far away the birthday of Joseph, and hope it's not the last and not even last of the last, not the last of the last time when we celebrate Joseph's birthday. All right. I wait for another 5 minutes to start. Don't know how I'll manage it, but kind of we'll see. It's my clearly first lecture on Zoom.
Okay, so one problem which I have, I don't know how to send you slides of David now, but
Share screen.
I'll open now screen in a second.
So also the slides appear on the conference webpage.
Okay, so
everyone is welcome to use the 2 minutes and download it.
yeah, it's the part of abstracts. You scroll to David Kazhdan and you see slides. Okay, so I'm not going to bother myself. Now I need to connect David to sharing. David?
можешь взять свой iPad и смотреть слайды, если ты хочешь.
David?
Okay. Fine. All right, so I'll start sharing screen. Let's see how it works. Okay, do you see it?
Yes.
Okay. Let's see how this technology works. Okay, you tell me when I can start. Hello?
Yes, I think you can start in 1 minute.
Okay.
So meanwhile, people are joining all the time, so it makes sense to.
Well, I'm saying you tell me when to start.
Yeah, I think it's time.
Okay. So in this talk, I present conjectures results of joint work with Edik Frenkel and Ittinghoff on Langlands conjecture for cursor local fields. So the main thing is just to try to formulate what conjecture is about. Now, the question is, if I, okay. So the idea to develop such theory was suggested about 5 years ago by Langlands, who attempt to construct Hecke operators in this setting. Actually, in some ways, the operators almost constructed in our paper with Braverman, but we stopped because we didn't know what to do with it. So my goal is to define Hecke operators of local fields and to formulate a number of conjectures. The conjectures which we really can formulate is only over median fields, but Beginning of a lecture is for any local field, and our conjecture is something implementation and extension of some ideas of diagram. Now, there will be maybe a series of conjectures, and I will, on every next step, assume the previous conjectures are true. Also, I restrict myself to the simplest possible group. You can ask conjectures, formulate conjectures in general case, but since we don't know how to prove them in complete generality for GL2, no sense to consider a general case. So we consider curves of a complex field, and our conjectures were proved for very small genus. Okay, now we're reaching genus 2, but it will be much harder afterwards. The reference are our original paper with Braverman, and then 2 papers, one kind of finished, one in progress with Ettinghoff and Franklin. So let's start. Let X be a smooth, complete curve over a field. We need just notation, pair of distinct points. We have canonical bundle in it. We fix a square root of a canonical bundle. Result will not depend in the end of choice of square root, but we have to fix it. And now we consider 2 different things. We consider band tilde, which is stack of rank 2 vector bundles of degree 1, and substack of stable bundles. Now, in this case, in this way, I took a rank 1, the stable bundles constitute a smooth, complete variety. It will be easier to work with them. I talk a little bit about other cases. We fix a line bundle on X of degree 1, doesn't matter what, and as usual define f of n as its twist by power of this bundle. And now we consider Hecke stack, whose points are tuples. They consist of a stack of pair of bundles, pair of distinct points, and a pairing of a first bundle to the twist of the other bundle, such that co-kernel is kind of union of these 2 points. So this is our Hecke stack we work with. So we really do kind of couple of Hecke operators to stay with bundles of odd degree, and just not important, but easier to discuss. Now we have natural projections. We have projections from this thing to projection to band tilde, and projection to x0 and possible combination. The projections QI are smooth vibration with fibers of P1 cross P2, just you do Hecke transformation, replace them one point X and point Y, they're independent, so done. And we know by Q2 the canonical bundle along these fibers. Now we take a subvariety, which consists of bundles, the tuples when bundles are stable, and we can see restrictions. So we have natural structures for any points. We can consider fiber over there. Now, what is important and what creates difficulty is that while the projection QI tilde was smooth vibration with compact fiber, QI, which is a restriction to Z, is still, of course, a smooth vibration, but fiber is not necessarily compact because we restricted kind of to open set. And this will be important. It creates serious analytic problem. So we started with square root of canonical bundle on X, and Bernstein and Rinfeld explained to us how to associate to square root of canonical bundle on X a square root of canonical bundle on band. And we have an isomorphism. It's important isomorphism which you use. So to say you have your Z, you have way to take pull back from one square root canonical bundle to way pull back of the other square root. They differ by this kind of explicit picture. So until now, F was arbitrary field. Now we come to the situation F is a local field. Now we have, for any local field, we have a map, norm map, from field to C star. If F is C, then remember square or usual norm. That's kind of what appears usually in analysis. And therefore, having this norm, if we have a line bundle of a smooth algebraic variety, we can consider C line bundle on the corresponding analytic variety, but just changing translation. So for if fields are arithmetical, this bundle has smooth structure. Kind of example, if we start original bundle was just ring of functions, but the line bundle, or then this bundle is just sheaf of smooth functions. Or of course, in non-Archimedean case, smooth function means locally constant. If it was a canonical bundle, there's a sheaf of smooth measures. What's important for us that if S was half density, if it was a square root canonical bundle, then the corresponding space with half density, and on the space of sections, remember we assume that our variety is compact, we have a natural Hilbert space, a natural Hermitian form, and we denote can consider the corresponding Hilbert space completion. Now we consider particular case. In our case, variety of the band. Remember, band is a smooth, compact variety. We consider to be a space of sections of the corresponding half forms, which you take invariant under H and Jacobian, where H is a corresponding Hilbert space. So this is a space of half densities or invariant under tensor with degree 0 line bundle. Now, the isomorphism, which we discussed before, defines a very important isomorphism on the corresponding analytic bundles. So this isomorphism implies that if you start with any section in V, then the restriction of pullback of section on the corresponding fiber is a measure with value in the line. Now we can define, or I may try to define Hecke operators. We start with section, we pull back, and we integrate along the fiber. Because the fiber is not compact, one has to prove that integral converges. It's not very difficult in our case. We can prove that convergence, and therefore we get an operator from this space of smooth functions to the space of some functions on the corresponding on band, which depend on the point of x, y. Independent is terms of y is a half form.
David, I'm sorry, could you please slow down a little bit?
Okay. So you want me to go back? All right, so let's do
not go back, just give us some time to look on this slide and then continue a little bit slower.
Fine. So what I'm saying, we start with section, we pull it back, we restrict on the fiber.
Dima, there is a question from Rami.
Hi. Yes, so if it's possible just to remind this, so V is measures on band G
they measure half measures.
Half measures on bungee, and then you
Yes.
pull them to some space, and then push them forward. Can you recall the definition of this larger space, which was bungee? I don't remember. Bungee times.
It was a pair of the bar space was with essentially 2 points of bungee, and it means two-dimensional bundles, and map, regular map from one bundle to the piece to another bundle. The quotient, let's go back. Problem is going back is not so simple, but we try.
So you also need 2 points, yes?
This is it here. Z0 is a stack. We have 2 bundles, 2 distinct points, and embedding such a quotient is concentrated in these 2 points.
Embedding one bundle to the other, such as a quotient concentrated point.
Yeah. Since I twisted it by 1, the quotient is kind of this file. Okay. Let's
So why
go
do we have a
back.
map from V to V hat and not from V to V?
Because I don't know that I get a smooth. I don't know a priori that the function is locally constant. So if you take it, let's forget about this half forms thing function. We start with smooth function and integrate. But because fibers are not compact, you cannot guarantee, and this is not true in general, that integral is locally constant.
Yes.
So we have this map. Now, so they define a map which doesn't depend on the choice of a square root. Now the first conjecture is that this map, first of the image is in L2, and moreover, it extends to bounded operator on H. This is non-trivial statement. We can prove it. Some cases, highest cases we can prove for genus 2, but we will see some examples in the end of operators. Moreover, these operators are compact operators, and the intersection of kernels is 0. This is statement which you can prove with simplest cases. We don't have a general proof. What clear is that if it's true, first of all, clear the operators commute because operators different point don't know about each other. And even self-adjoint, they're formally symmetric. So if they're bounded, they're self-adjoint. What is interesting that kind of the first 2 part of conjecture are really followed from another conjecture with purely algebra geometric conjecture. So this is what I'll try to formulate now. So we fix n, which n will be a big number. But for any n, we can consider a projective bundle or band cross band, whose fibers is projective space of morphism from over F and G. It projective spaces of more non-zero morphism from F to G of n. If n is large, the dimension doesn't depend on F and G. So it's mapped between 2-dimensional bundles. So you have subspace such that map a generic, the determinant not 0, which is the same to say image is not a line bundle. Now we consider subspaces before of 2 n-tuples of distinct points. And we consider subvariety as before of such maps. We fix D, and we consider subvariety of maps alpha, such a co-kernel in D. So this is smooth variety, which containing our composition of Hecke operators or Hecke correspondent dense subset. And now we can consider the closure in the Pn. So the closure will contain some operators of rank 1. Now we have a proper map. And the conjecture is that this proper map has rational singularities if n is very large. So this algebra geometric statement will imply validity of our conjectures. Let's discuss why in slides. We know that you have a map with rational singularities that push forwards of smooth forms are not necessarily smooth, but they continuous. So this is what will prove why this will prove our conjecture. So let's see. The rational singularities imply that the operator extends to bounded operator with continuous kernel. If you have operator with continuous kernel over a compact set, that it's trace class operator. And moreover, trace is given by very explicit form. So this, okay, so this algebra geometric statement, which we can prove only in few cases, but exactly in case we can prove conjectures, imply that actually more, not only these operators are compact, but some powers of them are already of trace class. Yes.
David, there is a question from Dennis.
Yes. What is the question?
Dennis? Dennis?
I don't hear a question.
Yeah, because...
Yes, okay, it was a question to unmute me. Okay. I didn't catch it. So did you... I didn't catch the transition from singularity being rational to why there exists a kernel.
There is a general statement which has the following. Suppose you have map x to y. One say x smooth and say y smooth, which doesn't matter. And suppose you take some smooth measure and you take push forward. The push forward, if you had rational singularity, is conversion. You have a measure can define on a regular set on the above. Then push forward, it's conversion, and is continuous. And this is equivalent to rational singularities. Rational singularity, what rational singularity tells you, essentially, that a pullback or canonical class is canonical class. So this essentially means reformulating a statement in an analytic statement that you can integrate section of canonical class and it gives you continuous function on the base.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Now, I consider just, it's a kind of remark, I consider bundles on degree. You can consider, it's important difference between even and non-degree because twist for line bundle shifts degree by 2. You can consider also bundles of even degrees. So actually you have two spaces of degree 0 and degree 2. And then also can introduce Hecke operators. But in this case, we have to consider semi-stable bundles to have a complete variety. And then our kernels operators will not be compact, but in examples with compute, they have logarithmic discontinuities in semi-stable bundles. So integrals are still convergent and operators still have trace class, but it is slightly more delicate situation.
Simon, can I ask you a question about the previous things as well? So in this conjecture about rational singularities, is it important that that they work with stable bundles? If you just consider the whole stack of bundles, does this conjecture make sense?
Over the whole conjecture, I cannot say, you see, I don't know, you see, when I talk about space of functions, I cannot work on a stack. It doesn't make sense because just let me try to answer your question. It does make a sense because kind of outside of a semi-stable locus, they have measured zero, you don't see them. You
No,
see,
but my question is different.
let me try that. So the only thing I can say, if you consider semi-stable bundles, then question makes sense. But then you have singularities. Then you have statement, you have logarithmic singularities in this case. I cannot make sense.
So they're not rational. So even
they're not. They kind of, you have this ALS. Rational singularities can be the special case of, I will say, some kind of defect, ALS defect. I can formulate more elaborate statement, which would be true in semi-stable case. But I don't want, it requires more algebraic geometry, which I don't want to go in. But you're right, there is a statement, there is a possibility to say something which will be sufficient to cover semi-stable case. I just didn't want to go in this algebraic geometry.
But in principle, you can consider, I mean, this question about singularity makes sense over the whole stack, right?
For me, it makes sense. For me, it makes sense on, you see, when we said that fibers, all fibers, let's go back for a second. It's not when I say this, the fibers have the same dimension for large n, it's not true for the whole stack. Because it's true for stable bundles. The moment bundle becomes very unstable, dimension of home changes. So you don't have fiber bundle. So you have to restrict your statement to something. I cannot formulate any statement of the whole stack. So I prefer to restrict to stable and semi-stable piece. I don't see any need to go beyond. But I cannot even formulate the statement for the whole stack.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So now we assume that this compactness, we consider T the commutative algebra generated by Hecke operators. The compactness implies the existence of direct sum decomposition of a space of polar forms on Bunge into direct sum of finite dimensional invariant subspaces. So now I can tell you what would be Langlands conjecture. Langlands conjecture would be description of the spectrum of this algebra. Unfortunately, for non-Archimedean fields, we don't have any conjectural description. This was the reason why we, Sasha, after we introduced Hecke operator, almost introduced them, stopped, because we didn't have any idea what could we say about the spectrum. And until now, I don't have any idea. So from now on, we'll move to the case where a field is complex. You could do the same for real. I just don't want to tell you two stories. I want to tell a story for complex, they're parallel for reals. And so we now consider the case on FSC. Now, in this case, we have helpers. In addition of Hecke algebra, we have global differential operators. Now, the natural question to ask is whether if you work in p-adic case, it makes sense to invoke p-adic differential operators. It will be very interesting to see if actually what we're doing for complex case could have some analog in p-adic case when can. I don't know anything about it, but it's kind of very natural to ask a question. But since I cannot say anything, I assume it were a complex field. So we consider, so we have S of U is sheaf of half forms, section square root of canonical bundle for any complex manifold Y. We can have any line bundle for a second. We can consider algebra global differential operators. And for any differential operator, we can define d bar with anti-holomorphic differential, defined in a very natural way. From now on, of course, we consider case Y is the abundance. And A, okay, I didn't say what is A. A is subalgebra generated by both global holomorphic and anti-holomorphic differential operator. This will be our kind of infinitesimal analog of Hecke algebra. So Bernstein and Driven described the algebra D as the image of a center of completed universal variable algebra for SL2 on critical level. In particular, it's commutative. It is easy to see that this algebra commutes with Hecke operators. So, as follows from our compactness conjecture, we obtain finite dimensional representation of algebra A on finite dimensional spaces HR. So let's, now we have spectrum of this algebra is described. So it is described in the following way. First of all, of course, we have a canonical isomorphism because H1 affects with coefficient canonical boundary with C. And therefore, canonical extension M of K square root of K minus 1 the square root of 1. We have a definition of Oper. Oper is a SL2 connection on M, a space of Oper denoted Oper. And for any Oper, we have a corresponding monodromy representation, two-dimensional representation. So the monodromy defines equivalent class homomorphism. What's important that we know that they're irreducible, not completely trivial result, they're never unitary. Will be useful in a second, but it's kind of a property. So, all right. Another thing, there is bijection between opers and formally self-adjoint operators from K minus 1 up to K1 half. And there is canonical isomorphism into opers and spectrum. So therefore, we described our spaces HR, and now we related to the spectrum, to opers, which is spectrum of D. So for any oper, we consider the local system, which is space of sections killed by holomorphic and anti-holomorphic operators. It's easy to see that space not empty, not real, not zero, only if representation are equivalent. And in this case, is one-dimensional space generated by some real valued sections, which correspond to Hermitian inner product on our two-dimensional representation. Since we know the representation is not unilateralizable, such form exists only if monodromy lies in SU211, which is SL2R. So in other words, we see this, there exists a flat section of our system only if your monodromy representation is real. Now we add conjecture.
Dima,
Yes?
there is a question from
Yes?
David, from Dennis.
Sorry, can you please go back to the previous? Can you please go back to the previous slide? It was too fast. Yes, it's
Okay, of course.
Yeah. Yeah. So one after. You
One
started
before, sorry,
one after.
Okay.
This one, yes.
You're looking for a flat section.
So yeah, I understand. So I'm not saying. Are you talking already about the spectrum on L2 or not yet, or it's just something abstract?
Right now, it's abstract. On next page it will do. Now I simply say.
Okay. So you just okay. Sorry. Yes.
It's just completely abstract statement.
Yes. Okay.
Could I move?
Just 1 second. So a row is two-dimensional right here.
Yes.
So, and you regard it as a real or complex? Is it? It's two-dimensional complex.
It is. Yeah.
Two-dimensional complex. And so
it is actually for row and row bar is four-dimensional local system.
And
which is a space of bilinear forms, Hermitian forms on your two-dimensional system.
Correct. And how come you
you're
end
looking
up
for existence of flat section of Hermitian form? It means you look for invariant Hermitian form, which means that your representation has Hermitian form.
Why am I looking for flat sections? I didn't understand that.
Because gamma is because I'm looking to solution ds d bar s equals 0. I'm looking for s, which is exactly flat sections.
I see. Yes, and what are you saying? So you're saying in this case it's real. I see. Okay, got you. Okay, thank you so much.
A priori it could be real or unitary, but as I said, we never have unitary, special result, not our result.
I see.
Okay.
Yeah, I see. Yes, thank you so much.
Good. Now the conjecture about simplicity of spectrum. I assume that HR are one-dimensional, which could prove in some cases, but not in general. So in this case, it's easy to see that there exists a map from R to operas, such, and this is such an algebra A, H, and from a homomorphism. Just because of Hermitian operator, action of D and D bar are adjoint, so you have this map. And now the conjecture is that this map is embedding. So you have.
Sorry, David, there is one more question from Rami.
Yes.
I'm sorry, can you remind who is R capital and who is HR
R capital.
little?
Capital R is we first had a Hecke algebra. Its spectrum is capital R. For any R, HR is subspace in L2 sections of half measures on which algebra acts according to R by scalars. Since you have commuting algebra of self-adjoint operators, your space is decomposed in direct sum of finite dimensional subspaces on which they act by scalars. So on HR, T acts by scalar. R, it means you have a homomorphism from R to complex numbers, and R denotes this homomorphism. The conjecture is this map is embedding. It means kind of very, you can distinguish by spectrum, and the image consists of all real operas. So in a sense, real means is what corresponding monodromy is real.
So the map kappa is just, you take the model generated by HR?
It is action of differential operators on HR.
HR is one-dimensional space and it's invariant with respect to all differential.
Since we commute, it's invariant.
Because two algebras commute.
Yes.
So operas are all one-dimensionals?
I don't, but means operas are one-dimensional.
Module. This algebra of differential operator is also commutative, yes?
Yes.
Okay.
So in some sense, this is almost an answer. The answer of half of Langlands conjecture. We describe some parameterization of R. Parameterization of R is a set of real operas. But now we can ask a different question. The question is, if we fix R, we fix kind of HR, and now our Hecke algebra X there. Could we describe the action? And this is our last conjecture. So for any operator which is defined by R, it's nothing, it's just notation. And since the operators act on the paper scalars, the restriction of Hecke operation on HR gives us a section. It is for any, if it were Hecke operates over functions, then for any x, y, you get a number. But actually, because it's a section of half, when we get some canonical section for any opera, we get a canonical section or here. The question is, what is it? So let's go to the next slide. The answer is here. You remember, for any real opera was a canonical section of half forms, of the half measures on X, and up to a scaling, the action of Hecke operators is just given in this way. So in this sense, we also describe action of Hecke operators.
David,
on
there is a
space.
question from Dennis.
Yes.
Yeah,
I'm
Dennis.
sorry, again, a little bit too fast. Can you please go back to the previous slide? I didn't catch
Yeah,
it.
of course, of course.
Yeah. So again, so you fix an opera.
I fix an opera, and we
so-
assume that it's embedding. So I fix some homomorphism, or it acts. I fixed some subspace HR on which my differential operator act by kappa R.
So I didn't understand. So therefore, depending on the point, a pair of points, you get a number.
It's not a number. Let's remember, TXY were not a function. It was a section. Okay, I'll go backwards. It takes time.
No. So that's what I don't understand. So
I know this is why I'm running back, but unfortunately, this stupid technique, it takes time, but it's worthwhile because it is important. It took some time to understand. So, okay, TX1 is a map from V to V, or from A to H, times this. Let's go Y. Let's go one step before. Because
I'm happy. I'm happy.
was, I understand, no. I just, you're not only one.
Yeah.
But this is why we get really not a function.
Great. And now the next question will be on the next slide. What are nabla sub X, nabla sub Y?
In a second. It was in the previous slide. So we come to it.
Yeah.
Sorry for moving slowly. Okay. This is it. The space of sections is one-dimensional, generated by S nabla. This is up to scalar, unique, invariant Hermitian form, which is a section of the corresponding one. So this is S nabla. It's something defined purely in terms of opera being real. Okay.
Okay,
So
yes. So again, S nabla is a section of what again?
S nabla is K1/2, this K bar 1/2. It's a conjunct. You see, for any K1/2 associate some complex bundle. by norms.
Right.
So it is a half measure.
Yes.
So this is exactly what it is.
Yes. Okay.
And the Hecke operators of half measures.
Uh-huh.
Okay. Now I have a couple of more minutes. Okay. So coming back, we proved conjecture for genus 0 and some for curves of genus 2. Now, but because for curves of genus 0 and 1, there's no stable bundles. We really have to consider parabolic bundles are not a big problem. We fix collection of distinct point. By parabolic bundle, we understand that rank 2 vector bundle with choice of one-dimensional subspaces. We can define the corresponding half forms, everything works, and the one conjectures can be easily restated in parabolic case. Now examples. So first case I consider only examples of P1. So first of all, suppose the general case, where P1 we have m plus 2 points. In this case, we can take band 0 and band 1 is just P1 to m up to affine transformations. That's clear just. So elements can be considered functions on m plus 1 variable invariant under shifts and homogeneous in degree m over 2 because they represent half densities, it's not functions, half forms, half densities. Then the Hecke operator is given by very explicit formula. Now, this operator, we have in this case corresponding differential operators called Kazhdan Hamiltonians. It's very easy to see that his Hecke operator commutes with Kazhdan Hamiltonians. And in this case, you can check all our conjectures. Let's consider even the simplest case when we have only 4 points, m equal 2. This is a case where I have very explicit formula, what t, which has this form. And this kind of operator you can check by hands. You see, just to say, when you have 4 points, we have semi-stable bundles. No? If you consider on P bundles with parabolic points, then if degree, every semi-stable bundle is stable, if parity of degree is equal to parity of number of points. If we consider bundles of degree 0, then we have semi-stable bundles. And if you look to this operator, you'll see that it is not continuous. If you just look to this kind of integrations, you'll see as logarithmic singularities, as it's supposed to have. And then this kind of, in this case, Kazhdan operators are called Lamé operator. And this is kind of quantum Hitchin Hamiltonian. And this is how this operator look. Okay, I think okay, the remark you can make your life slightly easier instead of consider Hecke operators, some smeared thing of Hecke operators, but doesn't help much actually. All right, I think I was asked to stop to leave people 15 minutes to ask questions. So I'm ready to.
Okay, so at this we should thank David for the lecture, and people should unmute themselves when they want to ask questions. First of all, thank you, David.
Yes.
Okay, you.
have more examples. This is
So you should be able to unmute yourself.
Okay, so are there any questions?
yeah. I have one. It's Peter. Do you have any more examples besides the plane minus finite number of points, which are very interesting ones?
Yes, no, we have a G2 case, the genus 2 case. We have genus 1 case with 1 point and most probably with n points. And we have G2 case when we still, but it's not question we can write explicit formulas.
And
Well, in this case, we really prove kind of that it's rational singularities and we prove results, but I don't know how to write. Must be right, but kind of.
So the other one was related to these integrable systems like Gaitsgory. These is the genus 2 one as well?
They correspond to generalization of Kazhdan. You see, Bernstein and Lin define these commuting second-order differential operators for any genus.
Mm-hmm.
This is exactly our algebra D.
Okay.
Because if kind of genus 0, you can write everything very explicitly.
Mm-hmm.
But in general, it's I don't know how to. I don't know. You see, in case of genus 2, you can parameterize bundles actually P3. So you can try to write formulas, but that will not help because for higher genus, there's absolutely no way to write formulas. I actually kind of
about the compactness. So the log the rational singularity is sufficient or some power to get the compactness, but you can surely allow a much more serious singularity and still have compactness, right?
Yeah. See, what I can allow, but I really believe they're not only compact. I believe a trace class.
Yeah.
And trace class already put more conditions on singularity. So it becomes close to large, not really large, you could have logarithmic singularities, but I expect that nothing worse will be there.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. Thanks for
I think
great.
Pavel is saying something. Let Pavel talk.
Okay.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Sure.
So yeah, it's more of a comment. So to me, this answer looks parallel to what one gets in characteristic P if one just looks at one gene characteristic P and looks at how the this global differential operators acts on sections of local sections of half forms on band G, and one gets authors with 0 P curvature in the as the answer. So yeah.
You see, Roman, what I proposed in kind of in between, I really think there's something periodic going on, which on one hand is very similar to what here, and which should project naturally to your picture. But I think the proper way to relate is really to create periodic analog.
Okay.
Then you have differential operators. And you have to see whether you can define Hecke operator or understand the spectrum. You see, the problem is there are two different complementary problems in our case in complex space. You can define Hecke operators, but you can't say anything about them. You can try to define differential operators, but they're unbounded. It's very difficult before you talk about spectrum. You have to make them really self-adjoint, which is non-trivial thing. Our first paper dealt with this problem in a special case. The moment you have both, if Hecke operators are compact, you have immediately self-adjoint realization.
So just to understand, so when you say periodic case, so that would be one G over periodic and function also. With one G on over QP, say, and then the
question will be
also with values, periodic values.
Yes, your question will be to define the framework in which you can talk about spectrum of differential operators.
So
I
this is
believe-
different from what you from
I
your work.
believe it should be some way to do it, but I don't have any understanding.
Yeah, may I add some comment?
Yes.
Yeah. So, in fact, what Roma pointed out, so we had some correspondence with Maxim Kontsevich, and he had similar ideas about characteristic P. And another comment is, I'm not. So maybe it's a correction. So for even number of points in genus 0, I think for any degree there will be semi-stable bundles. For example, for 4 points.
Okay. Okay. No, you're right. I thought about it that thing, but it's not. Anyhow, we definitely have to deal with semi-stable bundles. Just for presentation, I talk about stable bundle to simplify state. It's not a real restriction. All right.
So can I ask?
Yes, of course.
I have to confess, I still don't understand. So the elementary thing, what was it? Why was it a section of K1/2 tensor K1/2 bar? Can you go back to this, please?
Let me try.
Sorry.
Oh, you talk about S. Oh, okay, this I can explain.
Yes.
Yeah, this I can explain. This, you see, we have second order differential operator. 1 second.
Right.
Second order differential operator is from yeah. You have second differential operator for D minus 1. It's kernel section K minus 1/2. Now we can say D in D bar acting on kind of K minus 1/2 tensor K minus 1/2 bar. And we consider sections of this 4-dimensional system annihilated by D in D bar. So this is as delta, as nabla.
Just one moment. So you're kind of jumping between the point of view of degree 2 operator to something 2-dimensional. So that's what I'm.
Yeah. No, degree 2 bundle can be. Forget about the 2-dimensional space of such section. If I have 2-dimensional differential operator, this sheaf of sections is 2-dimensional.
That's correct. And again, so again, let's take the point of view of just usual opera. So it's a rank 2 bundle with a connection. Let's from this point of view. So what from this point of view, what does that snap?
Yes. This is something you know much better than I, and I wouldn't be able to say in this part. But I interpret oper as the self-adjoint operator from K minus 1/2 to K 3/2. This is how I understand oper.
Okay. Yes. And
now I take a shift. Now I have a shift of sections. I take this tensor bar. So I have K minus 1/2 tensor K minus 1/2 bar to K 3/2 tensor K 1/2 bar. And I consider sheaf of sections of D in D bar.
Okay.
This is 4 dimensions local system.
Okay, yes. And what is S then?
Nabla is we look now for a section of this local dimensional system where it doesn't have monodrome.
I see. Okay, the unique solution. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Yes. Okay. Thank you so much. Yes, better.
Okay. Any more questions? All right.
Okay, let's thank speaker again.
Okay.
Okay, and we have a 15 minutes break. We all keep this open, and if there is any wish to discuss something, you need to self-organize.
Maybe in the meantime, I can try make sure that everything works.
Okay, great. Okay, for this, wait.
I'm planning to use devices at the same time, so let me see.
David,
See that.
David, please, can you press the stop sharing screen button?
Yeah, of course. This is done.
Okay, great. Thank you. Sasha?
Yeah, so I was planning to do this. And also let me do one more thing. So I don't know if you want to see. First of all, can you hear me well?
Yes, perfect.
Okay, and
we see
yeah, okay, I'm sharing the screen. So
yes, we see your screen.
Okay, yes, I'll be writing on this thing. So okay, okay, so looks like it works. I can actually stop sharing for now, but
no, you can keep it, or you can stop. Okay. If there is an option, maybe to form a room, if anyone want to form a room, you should ask one of us, one of the hosts. I'm not sure how to do it.
To form what? I'm sorry.
There is you can form a private room for a couple of people, but I'm not sure how about. I forgot. Okay. Anyway.
Okay, so we started at 4:15, right?
Yes, in about 15 minutes.
Let me maybe use the time and ask if anyone has any organizational suggestions or experienced any difficulties with the format.
Yeah, maybe it would be good to remind all speakers who are using slides to go slower, because it's very easy to turn slides very quickly.
Thank you, Pavel. I fully agree.
No, but there is addition, there is a plus. The plus is you have time for questions. You see, the problem is you go slow, you will not have time for questions. I don't know what's better.
I think the price is too high, so it's better to skip something. I always explain to my students that when you give a talk on a blackboard, this is like running alongside someone else. And then when you give a talk on slides, this is like driving a car when somebody is trying to run and catch up with you. So if you push you can push the gas as hard as you want, but the other person can't.
Ivan speaking. Just one problem. It is really necessary from time to time to see prior pages, and it appeared to be difficult. Just one comment. Otherwise, everything is just fine.
If the speaker shares the slides, then people can go back.
So the slides of David's talk appear, and also some other talks appear on the home page under the abstract tab. So there is home, abstracts, and contact us. If you press abstracts, then after the abstract,
I'll try to find. Thank you.
So Dennis' abstract also appear. Dennis and Michael's slides appear right now, and David's also. Sasha will be using iPad. So then you are set up for today in this way. Okay, so I just fixed my settings. Now I can share slides. So I will try to remember to share Michael's slides.
I confirm. Mike, slides are just fine.
So. Okay. Okay, so Sasha, please. So I'm glad to present our second Zoom speaker, our second Zombie, Sasha Braverman from Toronto. Please.
Hello, can you hear me well?
I can hear but cannot see anything.
I know Dima, is it Dima Brevich, I mean, is there any problem with the screen? Because
no,
for me it looks fine, but
I don't know if you. I just have empty screen on which I read in Bernstein.
No, it is empty. It is empty. Okay, so I'm very pleased to give a talk at this conference, even in this peculiar format. I became a student of Joseph Bernstein in the fall of 1991, I think. I think both Dennis Gaitsgory and I, we first started to communicate with Joseph in the fall of 1991. We were both still in high school. And I made here some short incomplete list of things Joseph wanted us to learn during our first year. Let me write, attempted. My point is basically, so I'm going to share this list with you. And if you sort of compile this list correctly, you're basically going to get my talk. And the list, the incomplete, well, of course, the first subject was derived categories. Then the next subject, I think, so that took maybe something like 2 weeks, and we didn't know very much beyond high school mathematics at the point. Then the next thing was quantum field theory. I remember that one of my worst kind of mathematical nightmares up to date was reading a paper by Wheaton about Jones polynomial. Well, the next thing was which was kind of more gentle, was algebraic groups. This was all during the first year. And the next thing was D modules. And then we discussed Langlands correspondence with special actually emphasis there was a special emphasis on local class field theory. So kind of, I remember very well Joseph saying that somehow local class field theory is not a very well understood statement. So so basically my main point today is combine all this in some new way. Okay, so let me actually give the plan of the talk. So plan is going to be like this. Then first I'm going to review some particular statement, which is called geometric local class field theory. Due to Lamont around, I think, 1996. Then I'm going to present series of new and to me very surprising conjectural generalizations. There will be kind of two directions of this generalization, so I'll hope to be able to try to cover. And the even more surprising, I mean, these will be purely mathematical statements, but the surprising part will be that they actually follow in some formal sense from quantum field theory, from some particular part of quantum field theory, and maybe right here, three-dimensional n=4 supersymmetric quantum field theories. So you can actually deduce this new mathematical statements if you believe in the existence of what physicists are talking about. But of course, it's probably impossible to use that to prove anything, and so and it's difficult to prove anything. But still, something is known, and then my last part will be discussion of known cases. Okay, so that's kind of the plan. And so I'm going to now move to part one. So I'm going to formulate actually just the theorem, which is called local geometric class field theory. And maybe I'll make a few comments about why it is called this way. And then we'll proceed to generalizations. Okay. So okay, one local geometric class field theory. Okay, so let's fix the following notation. Let K be the field of Laurent power series, as I mean, that's kind of standard notation in this story, and inside we have the ring of integers O, which is the ring of Taylor series, then this local geometric class field theory is actually some equivalence of categories, and equivalence or more even better equivalence of monoidal categories. And the category on the left is the category of D modules on K star, where by K star I mean the multiplicative group of K. Now, just a remark, how is it understood? So this K star should be thought of as some kind of infinite dimensional scheme, or actually int scheme. This is int scheme over complex numbers. And it should be thought of as a categorical analog of the space of, say, locally constant compactly supported functions on something like fq of t star, or I can take a periodic multiplicative group of a periodic field. Just you take some local non-Archimedean field, like this multiplicative group, and take functions. So, I mean, it's known that it can kind of natural way, if you have some variety of a finite field, you can categorify the space of functions by looking into laddic sheaves, and then you can pass the characteristic 0 and instead consider D modules. And so the what is this thing equivalent to? It's equivalent to, well, let me write it and then I'll explain the notation. So here, this is the category of quasi-coherent sheaves on, okay, so let me, on something. So what is D star? D star is spec K, and this is, we can also put D to be spec O. And so D is called the formal punctured disk, and D star is the formal, formal disk. D is the formal disk, and this is formal punctured disk. And what is LS? LS stands for local systems, and LS1 is, well, local system will be understood in the RAM sense. So I'll say what it means. So just local system in the RAM sense is the same as a vector bundle with connection. So it's the RAM local systems of rank 1. So that means something very explicit in this case. So so how to think about, I mean, on the formal punctured disk, any line bundle is trivial. A connection, a line bundle is given by one form. So what you should look at the space of one forms on D star, which is something very explicit, and take its quotient by K star, which acts with the by gauge transformations. By the gauge transformations in this case are very easy. So if you have omega, which is a one form, and you have f, which is a function, then the gauge transformation sends omega to just omega plus the logarithmic derivative of f. So in other words, so this omega 1 of D star is some kind of infinite dimensional vector space, and you're taking quotient by K star. Well, of course, you have to sort of understand it in some proper sense. So somehow, well, part of the theorem is that you can define. So let me put this theorem here. So in red. So part of this theorem is that you can define the right-hand side correctly, and so that these things become equivalent. And moreover, there's a natural kind of monoidal structure on both sides. On the right-hand side, the monoidal structure stands a product. On the left, it has to do with multiplication on K star. It's convolution with spectral multiplication on K star. This is actually equivalence of monoidal categories. So just to relate it to usual class field theory, I said that the left-hand side has something to do with functions on the multiplicative group of a local non-Archimedean field, and this local systems of rank 1. This is some kind of de Rham version of Galois representations of the Galois. This is the de Rham version of the space of one-dimensional representation of the Galois group of a local non-Archimedean field. So this is a theorem, and this theorem is yeah.
I missed the definition of LS. Can you repeat the definition of LS?
Sorry?
Can you repeat the
I
definition
couldn't
of
hear this.
Can you repeat the definition of LS?
Well, LS is just the RAM local systems of rank 1. So here it is. And well, I mean, you have to, I mean, a better question is how do you define quasi-coherent sheaves here? And well, I have to be careful about this, but I won't. So I should say that this theorem is very easy to prove if you understand the definitions properly. But it's very easy to misunderstand the definitions, and then it's very easy to disprove this theorem. But somehow, I mean, you have to be careful. So, for example, when you define the right-hand side, you have to remember that this K star is a highly non-reduced grouping scheme. This is this is actually important. But again, this is all hidden under the rug here, and in the talk, I don't want to discuss that.
Okay, just asking for very general thing. So, what is this? The RAM local system of rank 1? What just?
Well, I mean, it's just a vector bundle with connection. So, I mean, explicit definition is written here. So this is just one form quotient by gauge transformations.
One form on D star?
Yeah, so this is what is the one form on D star? So one forms on D star. There's the things of the form, I don't know, A of t times dt, where A of t is an element in K. You have just think of an analytic disk. I mean, analytic punctured disk. So you have a disk, a punctured disk, and then we consider one form's quotient by gauge transformation.
Okay.
Okay. So right. So
is there a reference for this?
There's a paper from one, which is actually about one motives. It's actually unpublished, but I think it is on the archive. I mean, I mean, you should know this better than me. So what we want is to generalize this in various directions. So let me discuss in what directions we're going to generalize this. And unfortunately, generalizations will be conjectural, but even the ability to conjecturally generalize this, at least in some cases, is pretty surprising for me. So one direction of generalization will be kind of obvious, is the following. So so we started D modules. Let me just make one more comment about this, which will. So here we have this equivalence, and this is an equivalent. So later on, we'll be always dealing with derived categories, but this equivalence is actually holds on the level of abelian categories. So later on, all the equivalences I will be talking about will only be about derived categories, but this one is simple, and this one works for abelian categories.
Can you say why this is the right equivalence? Why you want this?
Because you somehow want to. I mean, if you think about well, I mean, they can then say some other things, but in principle, for example, like usual classical theory is something like a statement that you can have a spectral decomposition of the of locally constant, say, compactly supported functions on the multiplicative group over Galois, one-dimensional Galois representations. And so this equivalence is sort of manifests this. So for example, if you take a particular point on the right, it corresponds to a particular local system. To that, there corresponds some particular D module on K star, which will be some kind of character D module. So it sort of corresponds to a character of K star. But this is kind of a better statement. So somehow it's not the correspondence that a local system corresponds to a character, but it's actually equivalence of categories. Okay, so let's think about what we can do with the left-hand side. So we have D modulus on K star, and of course, K star is, I can think about as the K points of the group GL1, right? So you can try to replace GL1 by some other group. And actually that's what we'll do. And okay, so first direction generalization will be replace.
Dasha, you want to write K star is equal to GL1
K star. Thank you. Replace GL1. Well, we're not going to replace it by an arbitrary reactive group because we can't. By GLN. And even the fact that we can do it for GLN was, for me, extremely surprising. So somehow what we want is well, let me say the first thing that we want, and then maybe I'll say a couple of more. Interpret modules on GL and K in some, let me say, well, let me for now be vague. Later on, I'll formulate a precise statement in some quasi-coherent terms. One basically say that it's something like quasi-coherent sheaves on some space, but it will be a little bit more complicated than that. But essentially, that will be what we'll say, quasi-coherent terms. And somehow, somehow I think that from usual kind of Langlands or geometrical Langlands experience, you don't really a priori expect such a thing to be possible. For groups other than GLN, probably it is impossible. But for GLN, somehow surprisingly, it will be possible. And there will be some variants. So somehow, let me write here. So we'll interpret the category of G-modules on GLN of K as essentially as category quasi-coherent sheaves on something. A variant will be a simpler variant, but which will be is to interpret the category of G modules on the affine Grassmannian of GLN. Oh, sorry, on just G. Let me just write GLN here. The affine. Remember that the affine Grassmannian is. Let me just put it denoted by Gr sub n. This is the quotient of GLN of K by GLN. Oh, and let me write one more thing that will be in some sense the most interesting thing, but which I won't define right now, but I will define it a little later. I'll put the modules on. So let me denote it slightly differently. Let me write Whittaker category GLN of K. So this is some kind of analog of Whittaker functions on GLN of K. So all of this will interpret in some kind of quasi-coherent term. So it will be essentially quasi-coherent sheaves on something, but I will have to introduce a little bit more annotations to say on what, and also in some of these cases, instead of quasi-coherent sheaves, we'll have to modify quasi-coherent sheaves a little bit. Okay, this is one thing that we'll want to do, and if we manage to do this, then in particular, and if I have time, I'll discuss what it has to do with something which is called local geometric Langlands conjecture. So that's one direction. Second direction, maybe let me not describe it completely, but let me just give an example of a second direction. So let's just, so in the original thing, we were starting G modules on K star. Now let's start something kind of close to this. Let's start a G modules on K rather than K star. And know that because K star acts on K, the monoidal category of G modules on K star actually acts on G modules on K. So we should think about this G modules on K as a category with an action of K star. Now, here is a statement. The statement, that's the first statement, which is kind of new. The claim is that this thing is equivalent to, well, let me write the notation, and then let me write the thing, and then I'll comment on the notations. So let me write it on. Let me write here some space. Let me call it y for some just to introduce some notation. So this y will be the following space. It will classify E pairs ES, where E is a, again, well, let me write it, just local system of rank 1, as before, like this, and S is a flat section. So this is a kind of new statement, and in fact, you can there will be kind of well, I'll give you in a moment a hint how to generalize this. So this thing is apparently, well, let me call it a theorem. So I put quotation marks because it's not written, and it was, I think it was recently proved by Sam Raskin. And the history of this theorem is the following: that it actually appears as a conjecture in some notes that we wrote with Misha Finkelberg, and was really based on, already this thing is based on physics, and I don't know how to guess it without physics. So so this is so the real relevant physics, the physics you need. This one I'll talk about what is incoherent sheaves in a moment. So the physics is due to people like Gayotto, Dimofte, Hilburn, and you. So incoherent sheaves is the following: it's a close relative of quasi-coherent sheaves. So on on smooth spaces, incoherent sheaves, the quasi-coherent sheaves are the same. By definition, incoherent sheaves is the inductive completion of the derived category of the bounded derived category of coherent sheaves. So it's there's a kind of, it's by now well known that it's slightly different from quasi-coherent sheaves, but let me, for the purposes of this talk, you can think about, you can actually, you don't have to distinguish incoherent sheaves and quasi-coherent sheaves. So just for a theorem to be formally correct, you need to write it this way. And another funny thing is that I said that this theorem was recently proved by Sam Raskin, but actually a few months ago, back in the fall, Dennis Gaitsgory and I also tried to prove this theorem, and we actually disproved this theorem. But we disproved it, and then for a while I was sure that somehow this physics failed. But then Sam actually found a flaw in our argument, and it's kind of, if I had time, I would actually describe the flaw, because it is actually very very amusing. So so actually, if you look at this definition of Y, then you see that it consists of a local system with a flat section, and let's suppose that this local system is non-trivial. Then if it's non-trivial, then naively you would think that any flat section is 0. And of course, for a particular local system, this is true. But it turns out that in families, such thing is wrong. And this is what we kind of assume that this was also true in families with Dennis. And based on this, we constructed a counterexample to this equivalence. But actually, Sam recently explained to us that if you consider some very strange families, then somehow this fact is no longer true. And actually, the theorem is correct. So more generally, you can do things like this. So maybe, and that actually follows from this theorem. So let's suppose that we have, let T be a torus. And suppose we're given a representation of this torus. And the representation of the torus can be thought of as a homomorphism to the multiplicative group to some power. Let me, for simplicity, you don't have to do this, but just to simplify the discussion, let me assume that this map is injective. So then we have a quotient, and the quotient thesis would denote by T sub F, and the letter F here stands for flavor, because physics call this flavor symmetry. And then we can also dualize the sequence, and then what we can do is now because of this representation, T acts on n-dimensional vector space, and then now you can consider everything over K. So you can consider D modules on the quotient of K to the n mod T of K. And the statement is that this category is equivalent to essentially incoherent sheaves on something, and the something now, well, on something, and the something is the following. You consider the following space. You consider again ES, where E is a TF check local system on the disk, and S is a flat sort of CN valued section. So again, local system is understood in the RAM sense, and since you have a homomorphism here from the stores TF check to the multiplicative to the power n, therefore I have an n-dimensional representation of the stores, and therefore I can consider flat sections with values in any representation. And I'm actually cheating here slightly, but let me not discuss this. So this thing is a special case of what physicists call special case of what's called three-dimensional mirror symmetry. So three-dimensional mirror symmetry is some state in physics, and from this state in physics, you can actually deduce, you can expect something like this to be true, and then you can actually prove this. And essentially, it follows from this from the previous statement that that was proved by Sam. Now, maybe for the sake of completeness, let me say that in principle. Well, I said that we have notion of quasi-coherent sheaves, we have notion of incoherent sheaves, and also Rinke and Gaitsgory introduced a notion of incoherent sheaves with some particular singular support. Let me not discuss what this means, but actually, if you want this theorem to be correct, you also need some. So let me write it red. We need some singular support conditions here. But these are all mild things for the purposes of this talk. So let me not worry about this. But in principle, if you want to really formulate the correct theorem, then you need a single support condition. So okay, so this was one direction in which you can generalize those things, and in this case, it looks like this is a theorem. And in fact, there will be some intersection between this. I mean, this is the easy part, so I'm going to pass to the harder part right now. But there will be some intersection between the easy part and the hard part. So like I said, so for me, the most interesting thing is that mathematicians really could not. I mean, well, mathematicians did not come up with such a conjecture. And sort of only physicists did, although you see that it involves some kind of pretty abstract mathematics. But well, okay. So this is the end of the first direction. I don't know, any questions? So now I'm going to pass to discussing of GLN and its relation, D models on GLN in relation to local Langlands. Okay. Let's move to second direction. Okay, so let me introduce the main object on the coherent. So I said that this will be about D modules on. By the way, one remark about the thing, what I was talking about before. So this equivalence, for example, even this equivalence in this kind of simplest case, this is already it already requires derived categories. So there is no such an equivalent. I mean, there's no way to formulate this equivalence in low abelian categories. It really requires derived categories. So from now on, all categories will be derived. Okay. So the second direction will be about D models on GLN of K. Again, everything is understood in the derived sense. So I want to interpret this as some kind of coherent, quasi-coherent terms. So let me introduce the main player on the spectral side. The spectral side is a sort of is the side where quasi-coherent shapes appear.
So when you say D modules, you don't require any equivalency. Nothing is
Oh,
equivalent.
any equivalence. All the well, you can define as categories. So somehow the formal definition of this category is the following: that you first start with you take some congruent subgroup, and you first look at D modules which are equivariant on the left or on the right, doesn't matter, with respect to this subgroup, and have fine dimensional support. This category is easy to define, and then here it's kind of convenient to work with co-complete categories, with categories which are closed with respect to arbitrary inductive limits. So you just then consider this kind of easy, so say easy D models, and then just consider arbitrary inductive limits of those. I mean, you don't have to do this. It's just convenient to consider to work with complete categories, but essentially the D models and questions are just things which are equivalent with respect to some kind of small congruent subgroup and have fine dimensional support. But then we can also.
But this is not a quotient. Yes, you just take GLN and you consider it as some inverse limit of quotients.
Yes, if you want. Yes. So we consider all the models in GLN of K. As before, before we can in this local classical theory, we consider all the models, considered all the models on K star. There's no condition. So, I mean, so what is the main player on the spectral side? The main player on the spectral side is the following stack, which I like to denote by WN. And the stack classifies the following data. Well, let me write it. So here each EI belongs to LSI of D star, and this I, in other words, every EI is a rank. So EI is a local system on D star of rank I. And these arrows are some maps between these local systems, but not necessarily injective maps. So, for example, they can be 0. So if so, this thing is has this WN has an open substack which consists of local systems with respect to Borel subgroup, which is the same as rank N local systems with a flag. So if all arrows are injective, we get a rank N local system with a complete flag. But what I want to stress is that we do not require that they're injective. And this is kind of, and you can only do such a thing for GLN. So somehow, I mean, this procedure is sort of not Lie theoretic. In other words, if you just consider a local system with a complete flag, that makes sense for an arbitrary reductive group. Consider such a allowing some kind of degenerate flags like this, where these maps are not necessarily injective. That's something that doesn't make sense for an arbitrary reductive group. So that so I'm going to formulate a conjecture, or actually a series of conjectures, and these conjectures I can only formulate them for GLN. And but again, from the quantum field theory point of view, there's a reason why GLN is special. But from the purpose of the discussion, just saying that I allow non-injective maps is exactly the place where somehow we do something which is specific for GLN and not for an arbitrary reductive group. Okay, now what kind of structures do we have in this WN? Well, one structure we have is that we have a map from WN, let me call it pi n, to LSN of D star. I'll sometimes omit D star from notation. This is just projection to the last guy. And maybe I'll introduce some notation which are something which I call WN0. This is something which sits inside here. And this is just the base. This is the preimage of the trivial local system. So I take point modulo GLN. This is the which sits inside here, and this corresponds to trivial local system. And I take the Cartesian square. So this is just preimage of trivial local system. That will be convenient to just introduce this notation for for some purposes. And now here comes the conjecture. So there will be three parts of this conjecture. So part one will be about, well, what I promised, D modulus on GLN K. And the claim is that, well, let me actually write it on the next line. D modulus on part one, D modulus on GL K. This is going to be equivalent to the following thing. This is going to be, again, we need this incoherent sheaves, but let's not worry about, I mean, as the first approximation, that's the same as quasi-coherent sheaves of the following thing. We take Wn times Wn fiber product over LSN. And this again should be equivalence of monoidal categories. So here the monoidal structure on the left is convolution. The monoidal structure on the right is easy to define when anytime you have such a fiber product, you can define monoidal structure. So this is
Can you say what this equivalence means on the level of, say, isomorphism classes of irreducible objects? So it doesn't make any sense because
no. This is heavily derived. So somehow,
K groups.
Well, in K groups, I mean, I don't know. I mean, a better question to ask, in some sense, is what does it mean in terms of classical representation theory of Petit groups? And if you do it with this statement, then actually I'm not sure. So later I'm going to formulate. So now there will be parts 2 and 3, and about part 2, for example, or actually rather in my list it will be part 3. I will actually make a comment what it has to do with some classical statements about Petit groups. But so the next thing is the affine Grassmannian.
Sasha, could you please remind what is WN?
WN was this stack, this stack which is consists of kind of possibly degenerate flags of local systems.
Thank you.
So, and again, the fact that they're possibly degenerate is extremely important. And again, I said this already a few times, and I'll say it again, that this is where we see, this is where we do something which is specific for GLN. Okay, the model of, now we can see D modulus on the affine Grassmannian of GLN, so I'll denote it by just G sub n, and the claim is that that thing is incoherent sheaves on WN0. So that's the, yeah, this is just the, remember that WN0 is defined in here, so this is the preimage of the trivial local system. And now, and somehow, in some sense, the nicest statement, but the one which is kind of a little bit more difficult to formulate is the following. So I actually, so you see that we're doing something with this space WN, and well, once we do some kind of fiber, some kind of square of it, the other time we do some part of it, and actually it would be nice to consider the whole thing. And what I would like, well, let me write it, and then I'll explain notation. Let's consider the Whittaker category of GLN-K, and I'll say what I mean by this in a second. And that thing is supposed to be equivalent. Now, this time, actually, I have to, if I want to be careful, I need to write quasi-coherent sheaves, and there's some difference on really not quasi-coherent sheaves, not incoherent sheaves on WN itself. So just to say what this number 3 means, let me just say that, well, what is Whittaker? So somehow let's pick U in GLN, UN, let's say, in GLN, some maximal unipotent, some, well, let's take standard unipotent subgroup. So upper triangle, this is the group of upper triangular idempotent matrices, let's take some character of this into the additive group. So we can take just chi of this matrix chi of U to be the summation of standard matrix elements of the matrix elements which lie above the main diagonal, and then we do everything over K. So this Whittaker of GLN K, that means that we can see the D modules on GLN K, which are equivariant with respect to, well, let me write UN of K, comma chi. So first of all, I can extend this chi to a character of UNK by just, well, you can consider this chi literally defines a map from UN of K to K, and then, for example, consider residues. So that doesn't really matter. So we just extend this to, in some standard way, to a character of this group int scheme UN of K, and then this is standard definition of Whittaker. So we consider things which are equivariant with respect to, let's say, on the right. It doesn't matter. Say on the right. So let me, okay, so this is the conjecture. And again, I think that in the recent maybe 10 or 15 years, there was a lot of activity related to something which is called local geometric Langlands. And I'll actually a little later make some comments about what this means. But somehow these particular conjectures were not part of that, and somehow again mathematicians did not come up with such conjectures, and so somehow you can actually deduce this from again some statements about this three-dimensional gauge theories. Okay, let me do two things. I have so do I think correctly? I have 15 minutes left, right? So let me, so I want to actually discuss, so I want to discuss the following. First of all, I want to make some comments about how these things are related to some classical statements about periodic groups, and then also give you a survey of some known results. There aren't very many known results, but some things are actually known. So so let me talk about some relation. Classical things. So, well, let's actually look at this Whittaker thing. So you can also now to distinguish the complex case from the usual non-Archimedean case, let me take F to be some local non-Archimedean field, for example, field of again Laurent power series, but over finite field, or you can take QP. Then you can consider, well, in this case, we'll be talking about vector spaces, not about categories. So let's consider Whittaker of GLN F, which is just the space of Whittaker functions on GLN F. And so informally, this space is known to be this is the sort of direct integral of all non-degenerate irreducible representations of GLN F. So this is some kind of multiplicity one statement. So every non-degenerate representation here appears with multiplicity exactly one. So therefore, this category also should be thought of as some kind of direct integral without, so right now I'm being informal, but in a moment I'll deduce some kind of formal statement from this informal discussion. Integral of irreducible with GLNK action. This thing can actually be defined, but somehow let me not go into this. Now let me consider an example when n is equal to 2. When n is equal to 2, I'm saying what is my W2? W2 consists of just things of, so I have E1 going to E2. These are this is local one. The first one is local system of rank 1. The second is local system of rank 2, and I have a map between them. So assume that E2 is irreducible. This is rank 2 local system, and if we go to kind of usual p-adic case, this would correspond to irreducible Galois representation of dimension 2. And such things by local Langlands conjecture, which is actually a theorem in this case, they correspond to just irreducible hospital representation of GL2. So, but now let's work in this geometric case. Then, if we sort of, let's fix this. So fix E2, which is irreducible. Then, in other words, we consider this map from W2 to LS2 and consider the preimage of some reducible local system. Then we consider, if we consider the preimage of this irreducible, I call this pi 2 of this irreducible local system, this is just, we get just LS1. And this is just because any map from a rank 1 local system to an irreducible local system will automatically be 0. So, so therefore, what we can conjecture is that if you consider this category with, say, GL2, okay, then, well, by some general conjectures, it's supposed to be, this is supposed to be a sheaf of categories over rank 2 local systems, and the fiber at E2, which is an irreducible one, is supposed to be equivalent to just quasi-co of LS1, which we know by classical theory is the same as D modules on K star. So we got this statement. Now, this statement is a categorification of some well-known statement in representative of p-adic groups. So well-known statement is that if we have, say, V is an irreducible hospital representation of GL2F, and remember by F, F for me is a non-Archimedean local field, then V has a natural isomorphism as a vector space with locally constant compactly supported functions on F star. So, and here what we see that categorification of this statement is that if C is a, well, again, all these notions I'm now going to use can be defined, but I'm not going to say right now how I define it, is an irreducible hospital category with action GL2, okay. Then as an abstract category, then C is equivalent to G models on K star. Now you might think that this is just kind of a natural.
Sasha,
yes.
Sasha.
Yes.
In the usual case,
yes,
you have kind of more precise statement. You consider it a model over Borelsov, no, AB01, then it's canonically isomorphic.
Yes,
It's
the
not
same,
just existence of
the same thing will be here, but here, I mean, you might think that this is just a kind of innocent categorification, but in fact, it's not. And in fact, when I first told it, for example, to Dennis and Sam, they try to disprove it. And the reason is the following: that when you consider the statement in for p-adic groups, the way this F star appears canonically, you actually have not F star. This F star here appears. So let me write here: F star is actually parameterizes non-degenerate characters of the unipotent group. Parameterizes characters, I mean, non-trivial characters of, well, let me write it U2 of F, which in this case is just now, if you think about it this way, then if you start with this irreducible Castlev representation of GL2F, it's extremely easy to write a map into functions on F star, into functions on characters. So just if you know that if you have an irreducible Castlev representation, then it has one-dimensional space of co-invariance with respect to any such character, and that defines your map. Now, the point is that in geometry, there's a huge difference. There's a big difference between K star and K minus 0. For example, this K minus 0 is a connected space, and K star is very, very disconnected. So they have the same C points, but they're absolutely different in schemes. And if you just repeat the argument from p-adic groups, then the functor you're going to construct from such an irreducible capital category will be into D models on K minus 0. Now, you do have a map from K star. You have a map from K star to K minus 0. This map is defined on the level of in schemes, but it's not an isomorphism. There's no map backwards. But you can take push forward with respect to this map. And so the claim is that, so although the naturally constructed functor goes into D models on K minus 0, the claim is that it actually factorizes through D models on K star and push forward with respect to this map. And this is a highly non-trivial statement. And I don't know, highly non-trivial, but it's absolutely not clear why it should be that way. And I don't know any kind of general argument why it should be that way, but there's one example. I mean, you know, if you want to construct Caspidal representation of GL2 explicitly, there's one Caspidal representation of GL2 which you can construct very explicitly just by induction from unipotent generic character of unipotent radical over Hori. And you can do the same in the law of categories. And for that particular category, I checked this thing explicitly. But I absolutely have no a priori argument why it should be K star and not K minus 0. And originally Sam and Dennis tried to convince me it should be K minus 0, but somehow physics says it should be K star, and it is K star. But somehow I have no idea why. Okay, so I have 4 minutes left, so let me say a few words about known cases, and then maybe I'll spend 1 minute discussing relationship to some other works. So known cases there are very few of them. There are very few of those. So nothing is known when n is greater than 2. So take n equal 2. So remember that, let me go back. I have this 3 statements. So here, so I have a statement about D models on GLN. I had a statement about D models on the affine Grassmann, and I had a statement about this Whittaker category. So about 1 and 3 is not known for GLN either. Now number 2 is the fact that D modules on, let me write here, on the affine Grassmannian of GL2 are the same as incoherent sheaves on this part of W2, which corresponds to a trivial local system. That thing apparently is known. Again, it's not written. So there's a paper of myself and Misha Finkelberg where some much weaker version of this is proven. So what we proved, there's a kind of fiber-wise version of this thing over. So this W20 maps to local systems of rank 1. And so this, I can write the explicit W20. This is the space which classifies a local system for rank 1 and the map into E20, which is a trivial local system rank 2. And you can see the fibers of this thing. I mean, so this thing naturally maps to LS1 just by looking at E1, and you can see the fibers over. You can see the fiber over some particular local system of rank 1, and there we prove that we sort of compare these fibers and prove that they're equivalent. So this was the state of the art until like a few weeks ago. But again, using what I told you before about D modulus on K and some related things, I think that again apparently Sam Raskin proved the full statement. The full which is again kind of not something that mathematicians knew before. Now I have maybe 1 minute left, so let me comment about relation to other works. So first of all, there are works of Bezrukovnikov who described D models on, actually arbitrary reductive group, but let me take GLM here because I'm only talking about GLM, where, so here you can take quotient by some P1 and P2, where P1, P2 are some paraphoric subgroups, any two paraphoric subgroups. And descriptions, again, it's equivalent to incoherent sheaves on something. You take paraphoric subgroups, or you can take some variants of that. So for example, if you take a Vahori subgroup, you can replace a Vahori subgroup, but you can, instead of equivariant D models, you can study monodromic D models. That's some variants. And now here is an embarrassing confession. I don't know how it fits into my conjectures. So, and I spent some, in other words, I mean, it looks like it should fit very nicely. And well, if I had more time, I would. I mean, this is equivalent to incoherent sheaves of something. And that something sort of is, again, it should be, it can be of the corresponding stack of this, well, let me go back again. It's, you know, this thing, for example, very much, this fibered product I have here very much resembles the stymic variety. And so it's known that, for example, the Hecke category, the categorification of the Hecke algebra, affine Hecke algebra is equivalent by Bezrukovnikov to well, if you're careful, to incoherent sheaves on this on some kind of Steinberg variety. But how to relate the two statements formally, I don't know. And so the last thing I'm going to say, that's another thing which I don't know. So this is part A. Part B, there's something which is called local geometric Langlands conjecture, which, roughly speaking, relates categories with GLM K action to categories, well, leaving no, let me say, sheaves of categories over this LSN. Well, of course, this conjecture is for arbitrary group, but I'm working with GLN now. But this is only a rough formulation. So it's known that in well, even in usual Langlands, but especially in geometric Langlands, for example, near a trivial local system, something funny happens. So you have to correct it. So Arinkin formulated a precise statement. And so the flavor of his precise statement is the following, that on the left, you still have the same things, categories, well, appropriately understood categories with GLNK action. And on the right, you have to modify this notion of sheaves of categories over LSN has to be modified. So I'm not going to explain how. And my hope is that, and I think this hope is probably just an exercise, but so far I didn't do this exercise, that our conjectures imply a Rinkin conjecture. But this, at the moment, I don't know. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Questions?
Yeah, can I ask questions? So you mentioned that you have a notion of irreducible category with an action of a group, right?
No, I did not mention this. I think
you mentioned it.
No, well, okay. Careful. I think the careful statement is the following. I think that what is easy to relatively easy to define is the following. If your group is GLN, I think that it's clear how to define irreducible. So, I mean, first of all, it's not difficult to define notion of hospital category, and then I don't know what it means to be reducible for a category. I mean, maybe somebody else in the audience knows, but I don't know if Dennis is here or not. But I think that if you have ordinary representations, not categorical representations, then for GLN, if you have a hospital representation of GLN, then it's irreducible if and only if its Whittaker model is one-dimensional. And you can say the same. You can say the same for categories. You can, if you start with the category with GLN K action, easy to say what it means for it to be hospital, and then you can declare it to be reducible if its Whittaker model is equivalent to vector spaces. So I don't know. I personally don't. Maybe somebody else knows, but I personally don't know how to define, how to say on the nose what it means for a group action in a category to be reducible. But for hospital irreducible categories with GLN actions, you can do it this way.
And also, it looks like what you say, this partially makes sense for other groups. For example, you may take int Koch of local systems on V check times local systems V check over local systems on V check. And they should be fully faithfully embedded into something that you know.
Well, you see that this is about when I mentioned this Bezrukovnikov works, this is related to that somehow. But again, I don't know how it sits there. This is some funny thing. I mean, this will take time to explain. But you have this open subset which corresponds to all the maps within this local system to be injective, and then but I don't know what this, I mean, yeah, you can do this, but somehow, I mean, I think you can do what you're saying right now, but in the end, you will essentially, I mean, for example, if you do it for the affine Grassmannian, you will, let me talk about this statement. So, I mean, you have this, go back, yes. So you have this statement about D models on affine Grassmannian being incoherent sheaves on WN0. So if you consider things like on the left to be, say, equivalent respect to Iwahori or something like, or some parachoric subgroup, then this will be, for example, if you do Iwahori, then on the right-hand side, you will have something like N tilde, something like the Springer resolution, and which actually sort of sits inside this thing as an open subset. But again, I don't know formally how to relate, this Bezrukovnikov equivalence with this equivalence. I mean, I can't make a commutative diagram. Now, for example, if you can see the Iwahori monodromic sheaves on the left, this sits inside all the models as a full subcategory. So that means that, and that's supposed to be equivalent to incoherent sheaves on some fine dimensional guy, and then fine dimensional guy is supposed to be then sit as a full subcategory inside what I have here. And I don't know how it sits there as a full subcategory. So on the coherent side, I can't construct this fully faithful function.
Also, one is tempted to say that what could eventually make sense is take any representation V of a group G and just consider the models on V of F, right? Or maybe of K. And the category is an action of G of F. Okay. Now, you can do this, but you don't expect to have it. Let me give you a physical answer. If you have a G, if a group and a representation, to that you can associate some three-dimensional gauge theory, some three-dimensional supersymmetric gauge theory. And this three-dimensional supersymmetric gauge theory has a mirror dual, which in general is impossible to describe in mathematical terms. For example, it does not come as a quantization of any classical theory, so it's not cannot be written by a Lagrangian. But sometimes you can do this. And so in other words, sometimes the dual theory also corresponds to some other group and some other representation. And when this happens, then anytime this happens, you can actually formulate some kind of statement like this. And in fact, this statement I had for Torah, this is this is this part. So this is exactly a special case of this. So if you start, if you start with what physicists would call abelian gauge theory, so gauge theory with gauge group being a torus, then its mirror dual is also always an abelian gauge theory, but with for some other torus and some other representation. Therefore, this is what for physicists allows to write such an equivalence. If you start with an arbitrary reflective group and arbitrary representation, then the corresponding dual theory is usually impossible to describe, and therefore you don't get any sensible statement.
More questions?
Yeah, can I ask a question?
Yes.
So first, I just want to start with a comment that Sasha gave me too much credit. So there was a statement that we do something for arbitrary parahoric, and first of all, I only know how to write the right-hand side if parahoric is contained in G04. And also,
okay, yes, this
in terms of proofs, it's I mean, in the paper, I only prove it for P being a parahoric, and then conjecture it for general P. But yeah, it's in a paper with Lossev, which should be posted in a week. We make progress on this conjecture, so that's not very far from being known.
But in your old paper, there's a statement for arbitrary. It's I agree that should be parahorics contained in G of O. But for any pair of such parahorics, the statement is written in your paper.
It's written as a conjecture.
It's written as a statement there, so without proof. But it's, the word conjecture does not appear there.
It does. It certainly does. It's
okay. Maybe okay. I won't argue.
So yeah. So I also want to ask. So can you make this singular support condition explicit, at least maybe in some example? So you mentioned that it's not int Koch, but
well, I frankly didn't prepare it. Let me give you. I can, but let's not do it now. Okay.
It will take, but it's some version of this nilpotent single support, right? It's similar in flavor.
Yes. Well, I mean, yes, again, but again, the single support. I mean, in the conjectures formulated here, you don't need any single support condition. So again, there are three statements here. I mean, the single support was about the story case where sometimes you actually need this. So here you don't need any single support. So here it's perfectly so in part 1 and 2, at least this conjecture I believe in. You just get all of int co, and in part 3 you just have quasi-co. Now maybe one remark I want to make is that in part 1, if you had not int co but quasi-co, then that would mean that the local geometric Langlands holds in a naive formulation. Then it would see the statement that maybe so you see that this local geometric Langlands, if it holds in a naive way, not just categories of GL and K action are the same as shift of categories over LSN, that's naively. That means that if you consider D modules on GLN of K, this should be somehow Marita equivalent to quasi-coherent sheaves on LSN. Now, whatever that means. Now, that thing not literally true. So somehow the fact that you need this Arinka modification precisely said that somehow you don't have this Morita equivalence. You have something close to it, but you have to sort of modify things. And that has to do with the fact that that over here you need int code with quasi-co. If you had quasi-co here, then this quasi-co of such a fiber product would always be Morita equivalent to the thing on the quasi-co of the base.
Mm-hmm.
But the fact you have int-co here, that's precisely this kind of, and so my hope is that it should be easy to see that this modification is precisely Arinka's modification. But so far, I mean,
But on this note, like in line with Sergey's question, so this kind of Morita equivalence statement should be true for any G, right?
Morita equivalence should be true for any G, except that it's not true. I mean, it's not Morita equivalent. I mean, this is a statement for any G due to Arinkin, which is close to this Morita equivalence, but there's but you have to modify.
Arinkin statement is for any G. Okay.
Arinkin statement is for any G, but it's not an equivalence of categories. It's some kind of Morita equivalence, if you want. But and here for JLM, you can actually formulate this. The claim is a surprising thing in some sense. You can formulate this as an equivalence of categories.
Okay. Any more questions?
Actually, I have a question about your conjecture number 3. Will something like this work for degenerate Whittaker categories? So having the unipotent group smaller?
I know some statement for okay. Short answer is that I don't know. There is something I do know for some degenerate Whittaker categories, but not precisely this. So okay. Better to say that I don't know.
Okay. Any more questions?
Maybe you can explain how to guess these conjectures. I mean, why they should be true somehow. Well, maybe some words.
Well, for this, no. I mean, I definitely don't have time to. For this, I have
probably separate talk.
Another hour. I mean, see, for this, I have to introduce a lot of things from quantum field theory.
Okay.
I mean, I don't know how. I have absolutely no way to guess this conjecture from scratch.
You need to follow the Joseph advice for the first year student, and then
this is probably the best answer, actually, more or less for anything. So.
Okay, thank you again, Sasha.
Thank you. And we'll make a 10-minute break. Dima?
Yes, 10 minutes break. And meanwhile, I'll try to share this daily slides.
And Sasha, if you can send us the exit from your sharing screen.
Okay.
Actually, Sasha, are you still there?
Okay, so I think it's time to restart. Our next speaker for today, last speaker for today is Dennis Gaitsgory from Harvard. So, Dennis, please.
All right. Thank you very much. So most of the speakers are students of Joseph's, and I thought it might be appropriate that one of the talks would be about a student of a student, which is what I'll do now. So I'm describing the work of Lin Chen. So let me start with reviewing some preliminaries about representation of p-adic groups.
Dennis, can I ask a quick question?
Yes.
Can you please increase the size of the font?
What?
Increase the size of the font by pressing Control+ or something like this. Oh, okay.
So,
well,
let me see.
Yeah, and also increase the window to take all of your screen.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's see. How's that?
Yes.
Yeah, I think it's now it's at the maximum. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Pasha, is it visible?
Yes. Thank you.
All right. So we start with an reductive group G with a chosen Cartan subgroup, so and a polarization. So we have well-defined positive and negative Borels. And in the first part, when I'll be talking about p-adic groups, we'll denote by bold-faced letters the corresponding groups of points of these groups over a p-adic field denoted by bold letter K. So we consider the following bimodules for the group and the Cartan. So one is compactly supported functions on the quotient of G mod n, and the other compactly supported functions on G mod n minus. And let me remind you that if you have a bimodule for a pair of groups G1 and G2, you can use it to define functors both ways, from G1, from representations of G1 to representations of G2, and the other way around. So the formula is written in what appears as section 1.2.2. So I will not be reading the entire text. So just the text is much longer than what I'm expecting to say. I will be saying which section I'm on at any given moment. So we jump to section 1.2.4. So these bimodules that I wrote in formula 1.1, they define functors both ways between representations of the Cartan and representations of the original group G. And this is the induction as Jacquet functors respectively. So we denote by I and I minus the induction functors, and by R and R minus the Jacquet functors. All right. So almost by definition, the Jacquet functor is obtained by taking co-invariants with respect to n, the unipotent radical of the Borel, and similarly for R minus. So now, using the fact that G mod B is compact, you can rewrite the induction functors really as induction, and you will see that this induction is right adjoint to the Jacquet functor, and similarly for the minus counterparts. So, as is customary in the theory of reductive groups, it's better to use normalized induction, and it'll be important for second adjointness, and I'll assume that I have incorporated the row twist. So by the way, I do welcome questions, so please don't hesitate to interrupt me, because otherwise I may be going very fast. Also, please let me know if I am going too fast. All right, so now we come to the statement of Bernstein's second adjointness theorem. So it's whereas the first adjointness, kind of the fact that I was the right adjoint to R was more or less tautological, the second adjointness not at all tautological, and it says that the induction, the negative induction, is actually happens to be the left adjoint of the Jacquet functor. So the statement should be complemented by the following. So in general, if you have a pair of adjoint functors, the adjunction pair of functors, a potential adjunction between them is specified by either prescribing the unit or the co-unit. So in this case, one can say explicitly what the unit of the adjunction is. So namely, if you compose so you first do negative induction and then the Jacquet functor. It's an endofunctor of representations of the Cartan. It's given by the bimodule as written. It's compactly supported functions on the double quotient, G mod n on the left and n minus on the right. And the unit of the adjunction is a map to this module from the module that represents the identity functor and representations of T. And that module is just the Hecke algebra of T itself. So it's compactly supported functions in T. Oops, and unfortunately, there's a typo in the formula 1.2. And so the map is you embed T as a big Brouillard cell in the double quotient G mod n minus, and you extend functions by 0. You start with compactly supported functions. They have a well-defined procedure of extension by 0. So we have the unit for the adjunction, and therefore, if you want to establish the second adjointness, you have to write down the counit of the adjunction. At least this is one way to prove the theorem. And this way, historical came much later, and it was realized in a paper by Roman Bezrukovnikov and David Kazhdan.
But Joseph told us about this, I think, around 1995 or something. He was
right. So yes, the idea goes back to Joseph, but it was carried out in full in this paper. And I want to mention this procedure because it will play a role in the geometric construction that will describe Lin's work. So the counit of the adjunction is supposed to be, so if you look at the module that defines the composition in the other direction, it's the following thing. You consider the product G mod n times G mod n minus, and you mod out by the diagonal action of the torus that acts on both factors on the right. And what you want to do, you want to write down a map from the space of compactly supported functions on this set to compactly supported functions on G. So this is formula 1.3. And so this map is constructed using a piece of geometry that we'll review now in some detail, because it will serve us in the sequel. So now comes kind of an important part of this talk. So we fix a regular dominant co-weight gamma at a homomorphism of algebraic groups from the multiplicative group to T, and we consider the corresponding adjoint action of GM on G. So if you have an action of GM on an algebraic variety, you can consider the attractor locus, the repeller locus, and the fixed locus. So it's clear what this fixed locus is. Attractor locus you can think of as all those points whose limit as t goes to infinity, if you act by point t, flows into the fixed locus. So, so this is a general situation. So let me introduce a notation that I'll use in the course of this talk. So if you have a smooth affine scheme Y, we'll denote by Y plus, Y minus, and Y0, the attractor, repeller, and fixed locus respectively. So you have the embeddings of the fixed locus into attractor locus, and that embeds into the entire thing Y, similarly for the repeller locus. But also, in addition, there's a projection from the attractor and the repeller locus onto the fixed point set. It's the limit point of your attractor. And in addition to that, one could consider another somewhat less classical geometric object. It's called the interpolation. It's so denoted Y tilde. And so in my situation, when Y was assumed affine and smooth, you can define it as follows. So we consider it's a closed subscheme in the product of the affine line times Y times Y, and it's obtained as a closure of a certain closed subscheme inside A1 without 0, which we think about as GM times Y times Y. And this closed subset inside GM times Y is just the graph of our action of GM on Y. So we have a map from GM times Y to Y. We can take its graph, which is a closed subset in the product GM times Y times Y, and we close it up in the affine line times Y times Y. So if you look at the definition, the fiber of this interpolation Y tilde over 1 is just the diagonal copy of Y in the product. And you can prove that the preimage of the point 0 in A1 is the following closed subset inside Y times Y, is the fiber product of Y plus with y minus over y0, where y plus and y minus project to y0 by these maps that appeared above under the name q plus and q minus respectively. So moreover, y tilde carries an action of gm times gm, compatible with its action on a1 via the multiplication. So there are all these gm actions around. So now let's apply this to our situation. So we have our reductive group G and an action of gm obtained by conjugation via a co-character. And we construct this interpolation. I call it G tilde with script gamma to indicate it depends on the co-character. So G tilde is a group scheme over A1. As I said, it's fiber. So it's equivariant with respect to GM times GM acting on A1. So basic all fibers at all points apart from 0 are isomorphic canonically. And the fiber over 1 is just the original, it's the diagonal copy of G. And the fiber over 0 is the fiber product of B with B minus over T. All right. And so using this group scheme over A1, we'll consider an A1 family of schemes with, it's just, we take A1 times G and mod out by this group subscheme G tilde gamma. So it's a scheme over A1 equipped with an action of G times G. Its fiber over 1 is the original G, and its fiber over 0 is G mod n times G mod n minus mod T. So, and now, so I'm in section 1.3.8. We will take points of the scheme over our chaotic field K. So we obtain the space. It maps to the, well, K points of A1, so it maps to the original K. The fiber over 1, as I said, is G, and the fiber over 0 is G mod n times G mod n minus mod T. And if you remember, this was exactly the space which defined, if you take compactly supported functions on that, it defines the composition of functors in the opposite direction. And so what was realized in the paper of Abizrukovnikov and Kazhdan was, so they defined the map between functions. So I'm in the displayed formula just above section 1.4 by taking asymptotics. So they regard this G mod n times G mod n minus mod T as a limiting case of G. And so kind of considering asymptotic functions, they were able to define a map in one direction, which provided the counter for the adjunction. And I'm explaining all this because this will be a prototype of what will happen in geometry in several minutes. So now let me go back to Bernstein's original approach to the proof of second adjointness. I'm doing this because it will play a motivational role for a geometric conjecture that we'll state later. So for reductive group, it's also discovered Joseph Bernstein that the category of its representations carries a remarkable self-duality called the Cohen-Macaulay duality. So on admissible representations, this is the most standard thing. This is just passage to the contragradient representation, but the claim is that it can be defined on the entire category of, so if you want to view it as a contravariant self-equivalence, it's defined on the compact objects, which is the same as finitely generated representations. So, and in the same way as you showed, the functor of induction on admissible representations commutes with contragradient duality, in the same way you show that the functor of induction on finitely generated representations commutes with Cohen-Macaulay duality. So if you believe that, then this theorem of the statement of the second adjointness theorem can be reformulated as follows. So this is theorem 1.4.3. It says that the functor of Cohen-Macaulay duality on G and on T respectively intertwine the Jacquet functor with the opposite Jacquet with the negative Jacquet functor. So it's just a formal restatement of the second adjointness theorem. So in particular, so put it simply, for an admissible representation, it says that if you take the admissible representation of G, if you take it, applies the Jacquet function, take the dual, it's going to be isomorphic to if you took just the contragradient representation and apply the negative Jacquet functor. And so I've stated formula 1.6 because something analogous will happen in the geometric setting. So now we pass to geometry. So our ground field is K of characteristic 0, and we'll be kind of working with D modules. However, I should say that in principle, for this discussion, one can work over an arbitrary ground field and with the lattice sheaves instead. So it's kind of this entire thing is motivic. And so our basic object is the notion of category equipped with an action of the loop group. So instead of the group of chaotic points of our G, we're considering loop groups, which I denoted L of G. It's a group in scheme over ground field, and it has a subscheme of arcs L plus G. This is a group scheme over the ground field. And we consider the categories equipped with such things. So I omitted writing the examples. An example would be, you can consider some geometric objects such as the affine Grassmannian on which the loop group acts, and you can consider D modules on the affine Grassmannian. That will be kind of a typical example of a category on which the loop group acts. And so what we want to do, we want to kind of study the pattern of second adjointness and recall that so second adjointness has to do with the Jacquet functor. So let's study what's Jacquet functor. Jacquet functor was co-invariance with respect to n or n minus. But let's take it slowly. So I'm in section 2.2.1. So if you have a category equipped with an action of so far finite dimensional algebraic group H, you can consider the category of its invariance on the category C on co-invariance. So this is the usual construction of equivariant category. So if C was the category of D modules on some space Y on which H acts, this will be H equivariant D modules on Y. And similarly, you define, so equivariance is procedure defined by universal property in, and co-invariance is also universal procedure defined the operative map. So you have these two categories, H invariance and H co-invariance. At the same time, there's an averaging functor to C, just kind of average back to H. Canonically factors first via the projection from C to co-invariance, and then the embedding of invariance into C. So we obtain functor from co-invariance to invariance, and it's relatively easy to see. Functor, written in formula 2.1, is an equivalence. So, and this is true, as I said, for a group finite dimensional H or a pro limit of such, but it's not true for ind limits. And we'll be interested in ind limits because we're interested in the loop group of n, because there will be Jacquet function invariance with respect to the loop group of n. So I'm now in section 2.2. So we start, as I said, with a category equipped with an action of the loop group G, and we can produce out of it two possible Jacquet operations. One is invariance, and the other is co-invariance with respect to loop groups of n. And so if you look at the definitions, the functor of averaging is no longer exists. So there is no way to directly compare them. So however, these two operations are mutually dual in the following sense. So assume for a moment that C is dualizable. Let me not go into technical discussion what dualizable means. So the dual functors from C to vect, and dualizable essentially means that if you apply this operation twice, you'll recover C. So if C is dualizable, then its dual acquires an action also of the loop group. And so the operations of invariance and co-invariance are related in the following familiar way. So it's given by formula 2.2, namely that the dual of co-invariance is invariance in the dual. All right. So now we want to explore the possibility of having second adjointness in this categorical framework. So, and I'll draw.
Sorry, Denis, what is about
yes?
first adjointness?
Same.
Okay.
First adjointness happens with invariance as it should, just as it should. David, did I answer your question?
Yes.
Yeah. So drawing on the analogy with our formulation of second adjointness using the Hecke functor, and let me just flip the page and show you. So I'm looking at formula 1.6. And let me say that we view the operation of dualization on categories as an analog of the Cohen-Macaulay duality. So was there a question? Oh, yeah, I see there are some questions. I know, it's different. All right. So based on this analogy, we proposed the following question. It was actually proposed by Sam Raskin. And it says the following, that if you start with the category C, you take co-invariance with respect to N and take the dual. Is it true that it's the same thing as C and they took co-invariance with respect to loops into N minus? This is a really direct analog of the second formulation and adjointness. And we believed in this conjecture 2 years, but recently some evidence has emerged that the answer may in general, and this is going project of David
Can I ask you a
Yang.
question? So are you thinking about, in the usual case, when you work with vector spaces, you have to, literally you have to assume that something is finally generated. Something you have to work with compact objects. So are you thinking about dualizable categories as some kind of analog of finally generated modules?
Yes, yes. So this was a footnote on the previous page. Let me exhibit it.
Hello?
Yes, yes. Sasha, can you hear me? Hello?
I have some confusion because I think dualizability is a property of the category, not a property of the action.
Correct. So let's look at the footnote on, I'm just exhibiting now. So let me say that this analogy is loose. So this is not really rigorous. So in some sense, I view dualizable categories as analogs of finite dimensional vector spaces, if you wish.
Can you repeat the definition of dualizable category?
I didn't give it. So, here's the definition. So, first of all, dualizability makes sense in arbitrary symmetric monoidal category, and categories form a symmetric monoidal category under Lurie tensor product. But in very simple terms, it means the following. The dual of the category is funked from your category to vect and just applied twice. And if you get back your original category, so there's always a functor from the category to the double dual. If this functor is an equivalence, then your category is dualizable.
Just all functors, no conditions. No...
So okay, so we're getting into technical discussion.
Okay,
so
I see.
I'm happy to answer this. So categories I allow are used under arbitrary direct sums, and the functors that I allow arbitrary direct sums. So when I say functors, I only allow functors that compute with arbitrary sums, and then the definition is precise. Rami, did I answer your question? Rami?
Yes.
Yes. Your categories are something like stable.
So again, yes, when I say categories, these are technically, you can call them DG categories, or this equivalently, these are stable categories which are k-linear, where k is the field of coefficients.
Mm-hmm.
Is it okay?
Yeah.
All right. Did not fully answer your question. But if you wish, I'm viewing dualizable categories analogs of finite dimensional vector spaces.
And you're not bothered by the fact that there are no finite dimensional representations of periodic groups.
No. So this was, if you wish, this is, it's analogy. It's really an analogy. It's not, I'm not trying to deduce anything
Can I ask
from
a
the
question?
PID. Please.
Is it true that if your category is dualizable, then it's as a category, then it's dualizable as an LG module?
Who is answering? Who is asking?
Hi, Tamir. Yeah.
Yes. It's evident. True. Exactly for G reduction. You mean L? It would be compulsed for L of. So it's true for loops into. It's true for pro-algebraic groups, and it's true for loop group. It's completely false for L of n. Otherwise, invariance would be the same as coinvariance.
Thanks.
All right. So let's take up the question stated as 2.3.2. But in fact, one can answer one can ask a more precise question. So let's recall that in the first function of second adjunction, we actually prescribed the unit of the adjunction. So here one can also prescribe the unit of the adjunction. And I'll now restate 2.3.2 in a stronger form, prescribing this unit. Question 2.3.4, and it's the following one. Consider the following composite. You take L of n invariance in C, then forget invariance, just map it back to C, and project to coinvariance. So the question we're asking if this functor is an equivalence. So you should view it as an extension of question 2.3.2 with a prescribed, I can think now, unit or co-unit. So in fact, it's in this form that Sam asked this question. And again, so we're starting to suspect that in general, the answer is no. A partial evidence towards this question is provided by the following theorem. It's theorem 2.3.6. It says the following, that if you consider this functor, but then you take invariance, or the same as coinvariance, with respect to the arc group of T, then this functor is an equivalence. And so in the notes of the talk, there is a proof. I will not try to explain it now. Just say that this proof relies on, so it borrows its idea also from Joseph Bernstein. It's an analog of the corresponding statement in PID groups, where we express invariance with respect to L of n times L plus of T as invariance with respect to the Iwahori subgroup. So in fact, the proof is obtained by expressing both sides via Iwahori and comparing them. So that was the original evidence, and that's what's led Sam to believe that the original question may have a positive answer. So I'm flipping the page, and now I'm ready to state Lin Chen's theorem. So the theorem says that equivalence 2.3 actually holds for C being the category of D modules of the affine Grassmannian. So equivalence 2.3, let me go back and show you it's the theorem, it's equivalent 2.3.4. So this functor is an equivalence for C being D modules of the affine Grassmannian. So that said, so as I stated it, for a single affine Grassmannian, this theorem had been known, namely you can deduce this theorem formally from the statement that I just mentioned, that what happens after you take invariance with respect to the R groups in T, and that's because if you consider the L of n invariance in the affine Grassmannian, the action of R group of T on this category is what's called unipotent monodromic, so which means that you describe this category explicitly in terms of the category of invariance with respect to, if you take also L plus T invariance. However, so the full strength of the theorem is that in fact equivalence holds not just for a single affine Grassmannian, it takes place also what factorizably over the curve, where so you allow, so we think of a Laurent series as attached to a point of the curve, and we allow this point to move, and in fact we're allowing many points to move along the powers of the curve and collide. But even that statement can be in an ad hoc way proved by other methods, but in fact Lin Chen's theorem also holds for any parabolic, not just the Borel, and that statement cannot be proved by Bahori methods. So I'll explain the proof for the Borel, but in fact it's the same proof for axial parabolic. But
Good question. If you go back to the original question, so because you know what the adjunct unit is, does it mean that you have a functor in one direction always?
yes.
In which direction?
In which question? 2.3.2 or 2.3.4?
This question by Sam asking. I mean, the 2 point. I mean, 2 in your. I think it's 2 point.
Oh, I'm showing it. So which one?
Okay, I see. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. But even more remarkable than the statement is the proof of this theorem, because it uses the same idea of degeneration that as was used in the Kazhdan paper. So let me again let me restate Lin Chen's theorem as follows. I'm looking now at theorem 2.4.4. Invariance of the affine Grassmannian with respect to L of n and with respect to L will pair these two categories to vect. Namely, you just forget variance, go to d modules of the affine Grassmannian to d modules of the affine Grassmannian, and use the canonical pairing of d modules on any in scheme to vect. This is just Verdier duality. So when I say Verdier duality, it's the following pairing. So you take your pair of d modules, you take their Schrieg tensor product. That's the only tensor product that is for all d modules, and then you take the Ram cohomology. So the corresponding self-duality functor on compact objects is usual Verdier duality. And I've just reformulated kind of SAM questions in the second form by massaging duality around. And so the theorem says that this pairing defines a co-unit for the duality between invariance for n and invariance for n minus. And it's in this form that Lin proves his theorem. And so, well, we exhibited the co-unit. So to prove this theorem, what we want to do, we want to exhibit the unit. And the amazing thing is that this unit can be explicitly described and is given by nearby cycles procedure, which is again very analogous to the Rukavnikov-Kazhdan situation. So now let me describe what this unit is. So I'm flipping the page. So we're considering the in scheme over A1. So it's A1 times the affine Grassmannian times the affine Grassmannian, and let gamma be as before. It's a co-character of T, and we use it to have an action of GM on the affine Grassmannian. So just the group of arcs acts on the affine Grassmannian, and GM maps to it. And so, and consider the graph of this action, which is a closed subscheme inside the product GM times Grassmannian. And so the graph of this section is a map, and you consider a D module on this triple product, which is the direct image of the dualizing sheaf under this closed embedding. So it's a kind of diagonal, but shifted by the action of GM. And now we consider this GM times Grassmannian inside A1 times Grassmannian. So we are in the nearby cycle situation, and we take the nearby cycle sheaf of that. And we obtain a D module on the special fiber, which is the product of the Grassmannian with itself. And the category on the product is the tensor product of categories. So, and so we let our unit to be this nearby cycles. And so the theorem of Lin Chen says that with the co-unit that I prescribed, and this particular unit, the two categories satisfy duality axiom. So I should say that this unit object has interesting stalks. So it's section 2.5.2. Let me not read it. It's in the notes. I'm just saying that the stalks of this nearby cycles sheaf encode some interesting combinatorics. So in the remaining time, I would like to explain the idea of the proof. Okay, so the two things. So the first thing you want to show is that when you take this nearby cycles, so it's a typo in section 3.1.1, it's our object, not psi, it's the object unit, belongs to the category, the subcategory where you take invariance of n acting on the first factor and invariance of n minus acting on the second factor. And this is obtained from the following. So the claim is that the entire picture is equivariant with respect to the group in scheme, which is loops into this interpolation that we appeared before, this G tilde. So this object that we have constructed indeed lies where it's supposed to lie, and now we have that it satisfies the duality axioms. So and let's see what it is that we have to prove. So this is the last displayed formula on page 7. So let's start with the object of the category of invariance. So the roles of n and n minus are symmetric. So there are two axioms, but there's, in fact, it's one axiom after swapping n and n minus. Let's start with a D module F, L of n equivariant D module F. And let's take its external product with the unit. So in this way, we obtain a D module on the triple product of the Grassmannian with itself. Then you take its pullback with respect to the map on just the product of the Grassmannian with itself, which is identity along the first factor times the diagonal along the second factor. You obtain a D module on the fine Grassmannian, and then you integrate, you take the direct image onto the first factor. And what you want to see is that the result is isomorphic to the original F. So this is what you have to show. So let's look pictorially at what we have. So let's look at this giant commutative diagram number 3.1. So we are in the nearby cycle situations on 3 in schemes living over A1. So the top row is the triple product of the fine Grassmannian. The second row is just the product of fine Grassmannian with itself, and the bottom row is just one copy of the fine Grassmannian. And you can do the following two things. You can take nearby cycles upstairs, and it's in formula 3.2. So let me say nearby cycles of what? So you're taking the external product of this direct image of the dualizing sheaf under the graph of actions, external product with F. You're taking its nearby cycles, you put yourself on the zero fiber, and then you apply the transform. You pull back with respect to the diagonal, and then you project. Or you start with the same object, this graph of action thing, external product with F, and you first apply the integral transform. You put yourself on GM times the fine Grassmannian, but what you'll get will be dualizing sheaf along GM times your F, and then you take nearby cycles and you recover F. So in this way, you recover the two sides of the formula, which is the last displayed formula on page 7 that I'm exhibiting right now. So essentially what you have to show that the operation of nearby cycles commutes with certain operation of inverse image, direct image. So I'm in section 3.1.4. So in this case, direct image is not a problem because it's a proper direct image. So nearby cycles commute with proper direct image, but the inverse image is with respect to the closing, and usually there's one direction, but if you want to swap inverse image with nearby cycles, but in general, this map is not an isomorphism. So kind of the essence of Lin's theorem is to justify why in this particular case we can swap inverse image with nearby cycles. So let me say a few words about the mechanism of how he achieves. So first, he replaces nearby manageable. Let's consider a general situation nearby cycles. So I'm looking at diagram 3.3. So we have a scheme or in scheme y over a1. So preimage of 0, a preimage of the complement of 0, and have nearby cycles functor from the left-hand side to the right-hand side. So the first observation is that in this case, we can replace nearby cycles by unipotent nearby cycles. And that's something very general. It says that if you have your nearby cycle situation, but suppose you have GM acting on everything, compatible with the standard action on A1, and if you start with a sheaf which was monodromic, so if you take its nearby cycles, it will be monodromic. And moreover, if nearby cycles happens to be unipotent monodromic, then nearby cycles actually equals unipotent nearby cycles. So you can also ask, why did we bother about full nearby cycles functor and not just unipotent nearby cycles functor? And the answer is that, so this is for factorization. So the full nearby cycles functor, due to a theorem, again, of Joseph Bernstein and Sasha Bellinson, no, it's actually Simmer of Gaber. It commutes with external products, and it's only the full nearby cycles functor, not the unipotent one. So therefore, if you want to prove compatibility with factorization, you need to use full nearby cycles functor. But in this case, we do show that it's actually equals unipotent nearby cycles functor. That's observation number one. Observation number two is that you can actually express the unipotent nearby cycles functor via some more manageable procedure. So let's again look at the notations in this diagram 3.3. So nearby cycles functor is something, but there is a much more naive functor. You apply J lower star extension by direct image and then I upper star. But if you take, because you started with a sheaf that lived on a scheme over GM, the sheaf carries an action by endomorphisms by the cohomology ring of GM. So therefore, by transport of structure, this sheaf that you got by I upper star J lower star also carries an action of this ring by endomorphisms. Now pick a point in GM, if you wish, a kind of base point. This gives you an augmentation of this algebra, and then you can apply causal duality. So the claim is that unipotent nearby cycles can be recovered from this I upper star J lower star by the formula that's exhibited in section 3.2.4. I think there was a question in the chat. So Shahar asked a question, but I don't quite understand.
So this action of the cochains on GM, can I think of it as just the fact that this functor I upper star J lower star is black symmetric monoidal and I can apply it to the unit?
No, so it has nothing to do with the functor. It's just this cochains acts on F.
Ah, okay.
And it's a transport of structure. So therefore, what we have to do, we have to swap the operation of shriek pull back with this functor I upper star J lower star. Now, there is no problem with J lower star because it just satisfies base change against upper shriek. So now what you have to do, you really have to swap upper star with upper shriek. So you have to find the mechanism that is responsible for that. And here, so the mechanism is Braidness theorem. It's this game of attracting and repeller loci. Let me explain a general theorem that applied in our case gives this commutation. So I'm in section 3.3.1. So let's have a map of schemes over A1 from Y2 to Y1. It's kind of non-orthodox direction to have a map. And so then we have this Cartesian square that involves fibers at 0. And in this case, just but tautologically, we obtain a map in formula 3.4. So you can first upper shriek and then upper star, or you can first upper star and upper shriek, and there will be a map from the latter to the former. And we want to give sufficient conditions for this map to be an isomorphism. So here are the sufficient conditions. So suppose you have an action of GM on everything. So, and we have this varieties of fixed point attractor and repeller loci. And let's suppose that the following conditions happen. So suppose, so we're looking at formula 3.4. We have two objects. They live on the special fiber of Y2. So suppose the following happens, that both left-hand side, the right-hand side of 3.4 land in a certain subcategory on which the following functor happens to be conservative. Conservative means that it does isomorphisms. So it's the following: you star restrict to the repeller locus, and then you shriek restrict to the fixed point locus. So in our case, our repeller locus will be the disjoint unit of semi-infinite orbits, and fixed point locus is the affine Grassmannian of T sitting inside the affine Grassmannian of G, and this condition is 5. And the second condition is that, so the following diagram, it's in point 2 of proposition 3.3.3, is Cartesian. So, and the claim is that by playing with Braden's theorem, you apply it 4 times, in fact, you will be able to prove that, so the proposition says that in this case, this map in formula 3.4 is an isomorphism. So let me say what we're applying this theorem to. So we're applying it to the upper portion of this diagram here. And so you have to pick your GM action cleverly enough. So, and this was kind of Lin's achievement to find the right action for it to work. And I gave the formula in section 3.3.4. And so there I also explained why the conditions of the proposition hold. So, and that's how he ensures upper shriek commutes with upper star. All right, so I think I'm done with the talk.
Okay, thank you. Let's thank the speaker. Questions?
Can I ask a question? So, well, maybe 2 questions. So first, about the function which corresponds to this object. So you mentioned it's governed by some Kazhdan polynomials, but do I understand correctly that this is the kernel of the inverse intertwining operator acting on GO4 invariant functions, which I think also Jonathan Wang's.
Let me provisionally say yes. So I have to understand better what you mean by intertwining operator. But whatever words I remember from the intertwining operator, it's exactly that.
Yeah, I wasn't expecting any other answer. But also I want to ask, so how is this related to your work with Lin Chen and Yomdin, and so there's also second adjointness and similar issues appearing there, but is there any direct relation? Can these ideas be applied there, for example, to?
I asked exactly this question of Lin to investigate it. So okay. I was trying to think about it yesterday. Somehow my brain doesn't quite latch it. So in the work of Jiao Xian, there was, and Sasha Yomdin, so they also expressed some functors nearby cycles. So I think Lin's ideas at least would be able to reprove their theorem. So they had this amazing theorem that some functor equals nearby cycles functor, and I really hope these ideas. So, and the proof was non-trivial.
I think it can be reformulated as saying that something commutes with nearby cycles, although it probably shouldn't. But we can discuss.
Yes. So the proof is very nice, but it's non-tautological. But I wanted to. So I hope that Lin will be able to kind of connect this. This.
Thank you.
Dennis, may I ask a question?
Please.
So this nearby cycles construction, is it related to a fine semi-regular bimodule? Because semi-regular bimodule in the finite dimensional case is achieved by this kind of nearby cycles of specialization.
Let me confess, that's the first time I think or hear about it. So it's a very good
I think
question.
it's related to what I asked. I think it's like semi-regular bimodule is more related to this finite dimensional setting. And
so I didn't think of these terms, but it's a very good question. I definitely
Dennis,
must be
can I say a
investigating.
word, Dennis?
Please, yes. It's Lin, yes.
This same method also works for the finite dimensional case, not loop group, just usual reductive group, and replace the affine corresponding by the usual finite flag variety. Then the same proof works in that case.
Yes, in fact, yes, you wrote it in the paper, and I forgot.
Yeah, and this same method also works for the affine flag varieties, but nothing beyond that. The best we can have is for thinly ramified case, and David Young showed that beyond that, Sam's conjecture might be wrong. So this is exactly what we can get by so far. Yeah.
Yes, but Sergey was asking about, so if it, so we've got, let's say, on a fine flag variety, we got this sheaf unit and take its sections, let's say, kind of at positive negative level. So if this will be his semi-infinite module.
I think it's very plausible. I think it's very plausible.
It didn't cross my mind to ask this question, but this question should be investigated.
Can I ask another question? So there is one thing in geometric Satake business which was bothering me for years. I don't know if this stuff is somehow related to that. It's when you define geometric restriction. I mean, suppose that when it gets usual non-derived geometric Satake, for example, when you define a restriction functor from G to Levy, then you use a choice of parabolic, and it's not clear why two different choices of parabolic give you, I mean, I don't know how to geometrically argue that two different choices of parabolic give you the same functor. So, I mean, of course, it's enough to consider the case when you have parabolic and the opposite, and you have for some reason, I have a feeling that this is related to the stuff, but I don't know. I mean, is it related to the stuff?
I don't know if it's related. So about this question, so geometric Satake and choice of parabolic, experimentally, I find this is the quickest recipe to go nuts. So if you have a necessity to just make yourself crazy, think about this question. I've thought about it like many weeks, and it always ends up in some emotional crisis. So like it's an issue that really drives me crazy.
Well, but maybe this is the point when it should be resolved. I mean.
Probably, yes, but I don't know if this particular works helps in this way. But I'll be happy to resolve it once and for all.
Can you say a bit more about the failure of the duality of like the co-invariance for the loop group of n with the co-invariance of n minus? Like, is it rectifiable? Can you tensor with a line bundle and get it or something like that?
So I don't think so. I think so. David Young, are you here? David? He was here at some point. So no, it's something. So no, I think it's kind of it's a substantial failure. So I think it fails if you consider instead of the fine Grassmannian. So it still holds if you consider G of K modulo the first congruent subgroup, but it fails after.
I see. Thank you.
More questions?
All right, so we go home.
You're at home where you can go. Okay, so let's sing speaker again. We hope to see you tomorrow. Note that we will update password to current date. We'll send email and update the link. And hope to see you tomorrow.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye bye. Thank you.